Good evening. My name is Andrea Campbell. First of all, good evening. My name is Andrea Campbell. I'm the District 4 Boston City Councilor. I'm also the chair of the Committee on Public Safety and Criminal Justice. I first want to thank all the folks in the audience for turning out this evening, as well as the panelists, including the city employees that will join us, as well as community activists and parents and mothers. I'm joined by my colleague, Councilor Jackson. I just want to remind folks that this is a public hearing. It is being recorded and broadcast on Comcast Channel 8 and RCN Channel 82. If you have any cell phones or electronic devices or any other new device that's out there, please silence it at this time. If you want to provide public testimony at the end of the hearing, please sign in at the front desk. And there's a box that says public testimony. Simply check yes, and we will call you at the end for you to be able to testify. I'm going to read a letter from Councilor Presley, who unfortunately couldn't be here this evening. She's hoping to make it, but in the event she can't, I want to make sure that her letter gets read. Dear Madam Chairwoman, I regret that due to a long-standing scheduling commitment, I will not be able to attend tonight's Committee on Public Safety and Criminal Justice hearing regarding violence in the city of Boston. In my nearly 8 years in the council, I've worked daily to prevent violence in our city and to mitigate the trauma it leaves in its wake. I am grateful to the long-standing efforts of our sheroes, Tina Cherry from the Louis D. Brown Institute, Cindy Diggs from Peace Boston, Monica Cannon from Violence and Boston Social Impact, Mary Franklin from Women Survivors of Homicide, the Women of Lipstick, and Mothers for Justice and Equality. Tonight's hearing is yet another opportunity to renew our commitment to collaborate in the name of peace with my council colleagues, BPD, MAMLEO, clergy, and most of all, the community of survivors of violence who have become peace ambassadors. I want to thank the maker for putting this hearing forward and the chair for scheduling this hearing. Unfortunately, due to the snow, this hearing was rescheduled to a night. I have a scheduling conflict. I sincerely regret that I cannot join you, but I will watch the tape and circle back with Councilors Jackson and Campbell for any next steps. Thank you, Councilor Presley. This hearing is in regards to docket number 0136, an order for a hearing to address violence in the city of Boston. At this time, I want to turn it over for opening statement from Councilor Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and I want to thank you for your work on these issues. I also want to thank you for hosting this in the community where many of the incidents actually occur and where we can hear the voice of the people relative to all of these issues. And I just want to bring you to a couple of points before turning it over. Nasing Street is 2 doors down, 2 streets over from my street. In the past 6 months, 7 months, there were many shootings on the same street. One night, and there's an individual in this room, I saw her that evening, there was a young man who was killed on Nasing Street. And I had the occasion to speak to some young men who around the area who were very troubled. This was their friend, and they were very hurt. And I spoke to these young men for about 45 minutes. There was no trauma response that night. I used the basic breathing techniques that I knew, and I began to build a relationship with those young men. We exchanged numbers. A week later, as I was going to go get my dry cleaning, I rolled up into a crime scene. And I got out of my vehicle, walked up, and saw that there had been another shooting, another murder, literally on the same street. And I then was walking back to my car and saw a car stop, a woman get out, and she went over to one of the police officers, and with whatever was said there, she dropped to the ground. She was a relative of the individual who was killed. No trauma response at that point, and I ended up driving that woman to the hospital and trying to support that family. In the city of Boston, we need a comprehensive plan for violence reduction and trauma response that listens to the people in the neighborhoods and communities. Data and stats are a very important part of this and tell a part of the story, but we need to understand that violence is very, very concentrated, and that you may say that violence across the city is down, but in neighborhoods, communities, and on specific blocks, that might not be down, and that the people closest to the incidents tell another very important story that it is important that in government that we listen to. And I want to just categorically state that this community wants perpetrators to be caught. This community picks up the phone regularly, and I want to thank the officers and leadership at the B2 police station. We get more 911 calls at B2 than any other police station in the city of Boston at last notice. Maybe there's some updated information. But what I will note that is also troubling to me is an article that was published in Boston Magazine, and I want to quote from it. During a 6-month investigation, Boston Magazine obtained police records through a public information request and examined 618 shootings over 994 days, from the start of 2014 through September 20th, 2016. The results were staggering. During that time, Boston police had arrested fewer than 4% of gunmen involved in non-fatal shootings. That means, for instance, that detectives have not arrested anyone for shooting 14-year-old Kiara Harrison 3 times as she watched the 4th of July fireworks on Bauer Street this past summer. This is also personal to me because Kiara Harrison is my little cousin. Violence touches so many people in our neighborhoods and our communities, and we are all here with the goal of ensuring that our neighborhoods, every single street in the city of Boston, is safe for families to walk down. And the last thing I'll say is that sadly this weekend on Sunday, there was a young person shot as a family walked down a street. And I've spoken to that family, and we've seen a lot in the press. As we have these conversations, we need to realize that these aren't only statistics. These are families. These are people, mothers and fathers who did and reacted the same way that you or I would react if their young person was hurt. And in this case, a family that tried to get their child to the hospital in a private vehicle. A loving family where everyone was there when that child was harmed. We need to understand that, and we need not re-victimize families. And I will state, I find it unacceptable that confidential aspects of an ongoing investigation get out into the public. That is a problem. That does not build trust in our neighborhood. That does not build trust in our community. And in fact, that does not solve crime in the city of Boston. It is critical that we stand in government for solutions, that we give the Boston Police Department, and I want to thank the members of the Boston Police Department for the work that they do on a day-to-day basis, but we give them the resources, the structure, and all of the things needed to deal with and ensure that every neighborhood is dealt with dignity, respect, and given the resources needed to ensure that everyone is safe and that also all of the crimes that occur are solved and families get an answer. So I want to thank Councilor Campbell for her work. And I look forward to hearing testimony from the police department and also being able to hear some of the most important expert testimony that we will hear tonight, which are the voices of people in our neighborhoods, communities, and in particular those who have experienced and lost somebody to violence in the city of Boston. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Jackson. Before I turn it over to our first panel, I want to applaud Councilor Jackson for putting forth this hearing, along with those in the community who work with him to do this. I also want to applaud my colleagues, most of which are not here, but who also signed on to this. We had a council meeting where we talked about the issue of violence doesn't just affect certain neighborhoods, Dorchester, Mattapan, and Roxbury. It affects the entire city of Boston. Something that happens in Roxbury should concern someone that lives in East Boston. Something that happens in East Boston should concern someone that lives in Mattapan. All of us are interconnected, and all of us are part of the city of Boston. Each of us has a responsibility and a role to play, whether as an elected, whether as a police officer, a firefighter, an activist, those who have actually unfortunately been victims, community, residents, you name it. All of us can play a role. And frankly, in order to solve the problem of violence and any other issue plaguing the city of Boston, everyone needs to play its part. Clergy as well. I see Reverend Scott, who's a District 4 resident, as well. Each of us has a role to play. I think today we're starting with a panel with several panels with city employees for them to talk about some of the things they're doing, but also for us to hold them accountable. There are things that we are doing where our residents should hold us accountable. There are things that people at civic associations are doing, and we look to hold our residents accountable. You can only do this work in partnership. So thank you all for being here. This is a great turnout. You could be anywhere else, and you chose to spend your evening with us, so thank you. I also want to thank the central staff, Kerry and the team, for setting this up and doing it so that when we walked in the door, we could just get started. So thank you, Kerry. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Candace. And thank you, Kate. And now I'd like to turn it over to Dan Mulhern, who will lead the first panel, along with Commissioner Evans, the chief, and everyone else. I will say, before you speak, please make sure you speak into the mic, so you'll have to pass that around. And please state your name and your affiliation for the record. And I'll say maybe about 5 minutes. I know there's a presentation from BPD that might go 15 to 20 minutes. That's fine, too. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Council. Good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for coming out on a very rainy night. My name is Daniel Mulhern. I'm the director of Mayor Walsh's Office of Public Safety, and prior to moving into that position, I spent a long time in Boston as a prosecutor. I was previously the chief of the gang unit here in Boston. On behalf of Mayor Walsh, I want to extend a very specific thanks to Councilor Campbell. I see that we've just been joined by Councilor Flaherty and to Councilor Jackson for holding this forum this evening. Very specifically as it relates to Councilor Campbell and Councilor Presley, who is not here this evening. They have been a force within our building and City Hall, both formally and informally, in pushing us at this panel and those on the sidelines to have constructive conversations about what we're doing together to make a difference in our neighborhoods. I do want to also commend very directly Councilor Jackson for pushing the issue and bringing us to a public forum so that we could hear, most importantly, from everyone in the audience. What I will say is by way of introduction, is what most of you know in this room, that violence is a very complex problem for very complex reasons that lead to people in our neighborhoods harming other people in our neighborhoods. The mayor believes wholeheartedly that it is a city of Boston problem, not just a neighborhood-to-neighborhood problem, and that for us to make a difference and impact that issue, we all have to do it together across the city, not just one neighborhood at a time. I'm confident that we're introducing the most recent version of Mayor Walsh's vision of how we do that together to the council this evening, and it will be made public to you all this evening as well. It's already currently up, I believe, on the Boston Police Public website. I would encourage you all to look at it, review on it, and reach out. There'll be an opportunity for any input if there isn't enough time this evening for you to provide back to us. Because it's a fluid issue, it's a complex issue, and at different times changes from season to season and from day to day. I'm very confident also you're going to hear from subject matter experts today that are here on behalf of our comprehensive team in the city to answer any questions you might have around some of the issues that Councilor Jackson has raised, Councilor Campbell, and Councilor Flaherty. So thank you so much for being here.
I also want to thank the councilors for hosting this meeting. I think clearly, the community should be well informed of the numbers. I know, we constantly up these real time every day. We put them on our website, usually weekly on the stats, and we're going to go over some of our statistics. Dave Caribbean, who's head of our Boston Regional Intelligence Unit, who's in charge of the tabulation, who's in charge of intelligence, and he'll go over the numbers, and then we'll discuss some of the numbers with the council. And so, Dave, you want to get started on the numbers?
Sure, sir. Thank you very much, everybody. Hear me okay on this? All right. My name is David Carabin. I serve as the director of the Boston Regional Intelligence Center. As the commissioner mentioned, we are responsible for the majority of the analysis of data that's collected by the Boston Police Department and the provision of intelligence to help drive decisions that the department makes. And with that, I was asked to come in and give a brief overview of what the statistical breakdown of crime data is looking like currently this year, and in particular in comparison 2015 to 2016. We're also going to provide a 10-year overview so you can get a good picture of what the trends of crime have been in the city of Boston over the last 10 years. Bottom line up front, the last 10 years have seen a systematic decrease in crime across most, if not all, crime categories, and we've seen some substantial decreases in crime over the last 10 years. So to get started, up in front of you here today, you see year-to-date crime statistics of January 1st of 16 versus January 1st of 2017 until present. And what you'll see there is a decrease currently of 14% of our priority crimes. That includes a 13% decrease in property crime and a 7% decrease in violent crime. Again, overall, that's a 14% decrease. Also, what's important to note is that all of these crime categories are falling well below the 5-year average for each Part 1 crime category. Next slide. So taking a look at the complete year of 2015 versus 2016, we ended the year last year with an 11% decrease. Again, we saw substantial reductions across most categories with the exception of homicide and rape, which are up 9 and 35 incidents respectively. However, it's important to note again, we saw a 2% decrease in violent crime at the end of the year and a 7% decrease in property crime. Next slide. So in front of you here is a 10-year review of how the years ended. Overall, with the Part 1 crime, we saw a 37% decrease compared to 2007, which began this analytic study here. And we've experienced on average a 5% decrease each year since 2007. So again, there have been substantial decreases seen each year going back for the last 10 years. Next slide. In terms of homicide, this is a category that experiences probably the most variation year to year, but even with the increase compared to last year, we ended the year with 6 homicides below our 10-year average, and this was our 4th lowest year of homicide in the last 10 years. We were 21 incidents lower than our highest year, which was 2010, in the last 10 years, so it's important to note as well. Next slide. The rape statistics over the last 10 years have hovered around the 10-year average, which is 273 total incidents, but slightly below the 10-year average this past last year, and that 10-year average was 273 incidents. We've been below this average for the last 4 years, and even though we saw a 35 incident increase compared to last year. So again, we've remained below the 10-year average. Next slide. In reviewing robbery, you will note here that we have seen decreases annually since 2008. We ended the year with over 400 incidents below the 10-year average, and robberies decreased 36% since 2008. And we've experienced an average of a 5% decrease each year since 2008. So this has been consistent with our overall Part 1 crime numbers. Next slide. In terms of domestic aggravated assault, the city's experienced consistent annual decreases in domestic aggravated assault. We ended the year 230 incidents below the 10-year average, and we had 40% fewer domestic aggravated assault incidents when compared to 10 years ago in 2007. Next slide. Non-domestic aggravated assaults remain below the 10-year average. These incidents have hovered consistently around approximately 2,000 incidents per year for the last 6 years. However, it's important to note again, there were nearly 900 fewer incidents compared to 10 years ago in 2007. And we've again seen decreases across the board. Next slide. The next slide's a little bit different. This one here shows the number of arrests made. I think that intuitively most people think that when crime decreases, the number of arrests increase, but that's not the case. And I think that that is attributed to the strategies that we've put forward together with our partners from Boston Police Department and across the board. You can see here that arrests have decreased substantially over the last 10 years. And as everyone will point out to you here, it has a lot to do with the programs that are in place. We're not arresting our way out of this. Consistent with the annual decreases in arrests for the last 10 years, you can see that subtle decrease each year. We had over 1,500 fewer arrests than last year, over 5,500 below the 10-year average, and over 12,000 less than in 2007. So quite a bit of decreases there. Next slide. So we reviewed the Massachusetts larger sized cities to get a sense of where Boston stands as a city in terms of violent crime. When looking at 2015's official uniform crime report statistics, those are the stats that are collected from every police department in an official manner. You can see here that based on 100,000 population, Boston is ranked seventh per capita in violent crime. So we're not the most violent city by any means. We compared ourselves to Brockton, Cambridge, Fall River, Lawrence, Lowell, Lynn, Newton, Quincy, Somerville, Springfield, and Worcester. And again, that's the crime rate per 100,000 population. Taking another look at this in terms of violent crime rates, again, you can see where we fit in here. I believe we ranked 8th overall.
We don't have that.
Next slide.
Yes.
2016 violent crime rates or homicide rates. We took a look nationally to see where things stood. Again, in this instance here, we weren't able to gather the UCR statistics because they're still being compiled, but what we did is we reached out to each police department to find out where they stood. As you can see here, Boston is 8th on the list of these cities for total homicides, and this is in comparison to like-sized cities. You can see up there Baltimore with 310, Memphis 228, Milwaukee 154, Washington, D.C. 144, Louisville 111, Oklahoma City 65, Denver 56, and then Boston 46. Among the 9 countries, 9 of the country's like-sized cities of 600,000 plus population, Boston is 8th in homicide, 9th in total Part 1 crime. Next slide. So to review the shootings, I'm just going to kind of explain how we tabulate this up front. So shooting statistics are a subset of both the homicide and the aggravated assault category. They include incidents where an individual is either killed as a result of gunfire, and that would be denoted here as a homicide by gun, or struck or wounded by gunfire, which is noted as a non-fatal shooting. There have been 34 victims of shootings since the first of the year, 5 fatal, 29 non-fatal. And compared to the same time period last year, we've had 3 additional non-fatal shootings and 2 fewer fatal shootings. Next slide. In terms of location, year to date, the city's experienced decreases in District 7, Districts 2, and E13, and then Districts A15, which is Charlestown, B3, Mattapan, D4 in the South End, and E18 in Hyde Park have experienced some slight increases of activity. Next slide. So here you can see some of the trends. I know it's a little bit difficult to see from a distance, but that's a 3-year review by month. And what you notice here is that the shootings activity tends to spike in the summer months. This is a common trend where the number of shooting incidents remain low during the winter and gradually increase from spring into summer, peaking in the summer, followed by gradual decreases into the fall and winter. And the 2016 shootings trended down and have continued to trend down since August of last summer, and we've seen decreases since. Next slide, please. And in terms of our clearances, You can see here for homicides in 2015, there was a 73% clearance rate, 2016, a 63% clearance rate. And in terms of non-fatal shootings, 2015, we had a 14% clearance rate, and in 2016, a 16% clearance rate. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, so, you know, we went through the data, and we post this regularly. So you can see we've made significant progress in this city bringing down the violence. You know, obviously we have too many shootings because more than one's too many. More than one homicide is too many. We understand that we can do better with the unsolved shootings. You know, 14, 16% we're not proud of. I'm going to let Superintendent Long talk to that fact about the whole issue of the unsolved shootings. You know, I think we've improved significantly on solving homicides, as you can see. We're above the national average, both in 2015 and in 2016. And there's no real data out there on unsolved shootings nationwide. But this is nothing new. This is an issue that we've had for years in the city of Boston on unsolved shooting solving. But overall, you know, Boston is probably one of the safest cities by far in this country. It's not to say we don't have shootings and we have our fair share of violence, but we've come a long way. The men and women in this department do an unbelievable job every day. We can go through a lot of the efforts that we do, but, you know, last year shootings overall did go down in the city. We did have a little peak in homicides. Actually, 45 happened last year because 4 of them were from years previous that were ruled a homicide and carried over. And unfortunately, 5 of those happened in East Boston, which were young kids, you know, involved in MS-13 in some of the gang activity over there. So, you know, again, one's too many. But the challenge for us, and I know it's been an issue, is the unsolved shootings. And clearly it's not 4%. That came out of a Boston Magazine article that is like listening to hearsay. They didn't rely on our statistics. The author of that report didn't get that off our regional intelligence. And so we're going to talk about the unsolved shooting issue. With me, I have obviously Chief Gross, who helps me in running the department day to day. He's going to talk also Superintendent Long, who's chief of the investigations, who's in charge of the homicides, all crimes, but also the unsolved shootings, and Deputy Superintendent Marcus Eddings, who's under Greg Long, who also is in charge of our investigation. So with this, Chief, do you want to say a few things before?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending this meeting. Thank you, counselors, for bringing this about. What I have to say is nothing to do with stats, but everything to do with relationships. You know, for decades, in neighborhoods with the most challenges, we've been dealing with situations of cooperation and non-cooperation that still plagues us to this day. I'm not blaming anyone, not putting a finger or pointing at anyone, but the only people that gain from us not working together are those with criminal enterprise on their minds. We've done banner work decade after decade to where we're now working on reducing the crime. But we still have work to be done. That means everyone in this room should be working together. It was a tragedy what happened the other night. No matter what walk of life, you should be able to walk down the street with your children. We all know that. Let's not lose that we up here have children, and we up here and in this room have a human side as well. And that shouldn't be lost in your viewing of us just because of our profession. What we need to do is, again, work together. Ensure that we're building and fostering relationships and building and fostering relationships to the point where we can take constructive criticism and move forward to make this city the best that it can be. From Mayor Walsh, Commissioner Evans, the people that are in this room, you've seen us out here trying to build and foster relationships. We know about the negative history between the Boston Police Department and neighborhoods of color that were poor, and neighborhoods that suffered from poor socioeconomic strife. We've come a long way, but we still have work to do, and we should be working together. That's why I applaud this meeting tonight. Maybe we'll be able to educate someone about what we do. Maybe you'll be able to educate us about how you feel. But regardless, I know that in the end of this meeting, we should make a pact to work together and not tolerate senseless acts of violence on our community. Again, not to be redundant, the only people that benefit that is those with criminal enterprise on their mind. And I know we're bigger and better than those with those criminal intentions. So thank you for being here, and I look forward to working with you in the future to increase our quality of life.
How you doing? My name is Greg Long. I'm superintendent of the Boston Police Department with the Bureau of Investigative Services. Just like to, say I'm thankful that I'm at this meeting tonight and be able to contribute and speak to the issues that we're all here concerned about. Obviously, we're talking about the non-fatal shootings, okay? Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, you're looking at 14 and 16%, okay? That's not impressive, okay? As a department, our number one goal is to find justice for the victims, the families, and the community. All our goals as investigators would love to clear 100% of these cases, and that's the honest-to-goodness truth. The people that are most invested in these cases on this department, these investigators that have these cases, they have the relationships with the families, and they have these caseloads. I'm not, as the chief said, I'm not going to sit here. This isn't a blame game. This is an excuse game. As a department, we're not perfect, and we're continuously looking inward to see what we can do better. But the frustrating reality on these non-fatal shootings is the vast majority of them, we get zero cooperation. In my position, in Deputy Eddings, every time there's a shooting, we sit and we talk with the superior detectives of these different districts to get a summary of the cases, the ones either we're out on the scene or we talk to them. And over and over and over again, their frustration is the lack of cooperation from victims and or witnesses. That's not to say every victim is uncooperative. I mean, some, obviously didn't see anything, but during the course of investigation with video that we gather and other witness statements, it's clear when we're talking to some of these victims, they're not being forthright. One district in particular, last year had 36 shootings. 15 of those victims flat out refused to cooperate with them. And by that, I mean, they just said, I'm not talking to you. Never have and haven't throughout the entire course of investigation. That doesn't mean these investigators stop trying to investigate these cases. They'll go back to that victim, try to implore them to please, give something. Like I said, legitimately some of these victims didn't see anything. But during the course of a lot of these investigations, based on other stuff, other witness, other video, it's clear when we're talking to some of these victims that they're not being forthright. Again, like I said, that does not mean we stop working these cases. But at the end of the day, trying to put some of these cases together circumstantially without a live witness on a stand reduces your chances of being able to make an arrest. Kind of going off topic a little bit, not off topic, but another example. There's parts of this country that I've been to some of these, I've been to seminars across the country, and their standards for clearing shooting cases and/or homicides are different from around here. There's different counties where if they think a certain individual is the shooter and they can't make the case because one person, the one witness they know that could give them the case doesn't do it, they're able to clear that case. We don't do that here because I think you talk about if you want to undercut whatever credibility and trust you have in the community, go ahead and start making phony clearances on cases when everybody in the community knows the person that's responsible for the shooting is standing on the street corner, but we as a department are taking credit for it. We don't engage in that. We never will. And again, like I said, 14 and 16%, that's not great. And I don't think anyone in this department is happy about it. And we're going to continue to work towards increasing those numbers. Myself and the deputy, we've already sat down weeks ago internally, sit down with the district attorney's office, and also speak with them concerning the grand jury in different ways we might be able to do things. The ATF has also, offered their help in combating this problem. So I just want everyone in this room to know, just because it's 14, 16%, and just because at the moment we don't get cooperation in a lot of these cases are worked. We give the same amount of attention given to homicide cases are given to these non-fatal shootings. We started standardized policy and procedures a couple of years back. The same way a homicide's investigated is the same way a non-fatal shooting is investigated. And like the commissioner and the chief have asked, we as a department, we're looking for help. We can't do this all ourselves. We're going to do what we can do, but at the end of the day, we need everyone in here to help us out in this issue. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Marcus Settings. I'm the Deputy Superintendent of the Criminal Investigation Division. I'm just going to echo what the PC and Willie and Superintendent Long said. The 14%, 16% is unacceptable. One of the things that was initially said was that we need to work as a partnership. And that means that we have to work better with you, and the community has to work better with us. One of the things that I found is that when you have an uncooperative witness, we continue to try to go back to that particular witness just to get them to come forward. And you see the numbers. The homicide clearance rates were actually higher than the non-fatal rates. And I think there's a certain dynamic with that. When you have somebody that's deceased or has been killed, you believe it or not, you have some people who are more willing to come forward and talk about this particular, what they've seen in that. When you have a living victim, when that victim is uncooperative, then they look around, people look around at him, family members, friends, and maybe just regular general witnesses that may not know them and say, well, they're not giving them information, why should I? Why should I put myself at risk? So I think that one of the things that we need to do is convince these victims and these witnesses that if you don't speak up, what's going to happen is it's going to continue, because the person that they were targeting is still alive. That means that there may be a target again, and we never know what's going to happen the next time around. It could be they can be successful and kill the target, or they may hit an innocent bystander, such as a child, or somebody's mother, or somebody's father. So I think one of the things that we really need to do is that partnership is real, and I think that we can work better at probably listening to your concerns and your issues, and we would expect, or hopefully, that we can get you to listen to us as well and form some type of partnership. But with that being said, I think the 14 and 16% is unacceptable. Even the 63 and 73% with the homicide, that's unacceptable. We like the superintendent said, we'd like to solve every one of these fatals and non-fatal shootings. But we're not going to be able to do it in a isolated environment, meaning that we can't isolate ourselves from you, you can't isolate yourselves from us. We really need to work together.
Thank you, you guys, and thank you for the presentation. I just want to first acknowledge we've been joined by Councilor Flaherty, Councilor O'Malley, Councilor Asabi George, and Council President Wu, so thank you for being here. Before I turn it over to others for questions, I just have a couple of my own, and I want to sort of limit the questions we have because we have two more panels after this, and I want to make sure that we save enough time for the community panel as well as public testimony at the end. So I'll be brief. Quick question, Dan, the presentation tonight is made, the vision and what you have there is going to be made available to the public?
That's correct, Council. It's actually
Okay.
up on BPD website as we speak.
And you have some hard copies here
I have some
tonight?
hard copies for
Okay.
the council, and there may be some additional hard copies for persons present if they want a copy.
Okay. Is the data presentation, is that online, or can that be made available to the public as well?
We can make that available.
And then lastly, and I'm sure we'll hear about this tonight, at least, so most of what I pulled out of tonight is that cooperation piece. And we often hear that in community, we hear that from officers, we hear that in our spaces down at City Hall. And we also hear the flip side as to why some folks don't cooperate or participate in investigations. And we've had candid examples where we've had folks come forward who wanted to cooperate, but unfortunately didn't think that they were going to be protected. And I understand that that is a solution that we can all play a part in. One, AG has funding, the DA's office has funding. The question I have is whether or not BPD has funding for some protection. Sometimes it requires someone moving from their home to a different space. I'm sorry, if BPD has funding for protection. Sometimes it requires folks moving to a different home or relocating. And if they don't, how do we on the council side assist in your efforts to make it easier for folks to be able to cooperate, but also acknowledging that when they do come forward, we have to also protect them and support them?
The department, the funding that they have is short-term, it's not long-term. And I know there's been a lot of talk about statewide funding for that, for programs such as that. That's where the money will come from. I think that's, like I said, to answer your question, as far as the Boston Police Department, we don't have long-term funding for that. And I know that it's an issue. Haven't been in the homicide unit in this position now. Obviously, that's a real concern for victims and witnesses. How can I be protected? I wish I had, a full answer to give you as far as that. I just think that, I think with enough people talking about this issue in this state, I think funding is the key. And I think hopefully the state could find funding to provide cities such as Boston enough resources and money. So when you have people that need to get moved out and you need to do it in a hurry, you need to do it long-term, that we'll have those funds available.
I might just add, Council Campbell, when you ask what could be done for everyone in the room and including the council, that fund that you referred to that's administered by the Attorney General's office,
Right.
That's funded by the state, and over the years it's been funded or funded less and then level funded. And to the extent that anybody in this room can advocate for that fund to be funded significantly more than it has in the past, that would provide greater opportunity for the department and the district attorney's office to help alleviate some safety concerns for witnesses and victims of crime.
And I'm not going to pretend that I know all the reasons as to why someone chooses not to cooperate, but some of the reasons we have heard are for those very reasons. And so I think that's something we can definitely take on. I like to be solution-oriented, so when we hear about a problem, it's what can we do as a body to address it. So I'm going to leave my questions there. I'm going to turn it over to Councilor Jackson, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you very much. Just to go back to your point, Madam Chairwoman, so we can understand, and I think we all can understand wanting to be personally safe and ensure that our families are safe. So are there any additional things that can be done to ensure that a witness is going to be safe? Boston's a very small city, 24 miles long. And again, violent crime generally is highly concentrated. And so we are a city where we are going to see one another. And so are there any additional aspects that we can look at there? And then also, in the past couple of years, do you know if there's been any surplus in the witness protection program? Because one of the other components here is that when we speak about cooperation, I am told that those funds are based on an individual's willingness to cooperate. And so are there any other options to ensure that someone who does speak up is actually safe once they speak up, and to ensure their personal safety and the safety of their families?
I think, Councilor Jackson, I'll try to answer at least part of that. One of the topics that has been a very active discussion for the mayor, led by the advocacy of Tina Cherry, who I know you know well, is to take a hard look at the statute in its current form to create more statutory flexibility around what kind of assistance can be provided for witnesses and victims. So I think that answers part of your question. The other part of your question that might not necessarily pertain to available funding, but what other types of things can the city do, or maybe the department do, or the district attorney's office do, that helps keep witnesses or victims of crime safe. So there's a very active protocol. You'll hear from the Boston Public Schools today, a very active protocol in transferring young people that may have been exposed to violence and have the concerns that you outlined around transferring schools. There is a protocol within our Boston Housing Authority that allows for families that may have been harmed in and around their home or neighborhood that they live in to be provided opportunities for emergency transfers for safety reasons. And there are a number of other partners in the room that you'll hear from shortly that do lots of different work around trauma response that I know has been a concern of yours and other members of the council, in particular Council Presley for a long time, to ensure that resources are identified and allocated appropriately.
And also, you know, obviously if someone's in that type of danger, we would provide 24/7 coverage of their home if they came forward, especially in a serious violent offense, until we would get the district attorney's office to relocate them. So we would never leave anyone out there who came forward, especially on a serious violent offense. We'd make sure their house was watched 24/7 until we could relocate them somewhere.
So I heard you note, and so one, I'd love a definition of the clearance rate once more. And what about, I heard when an individual is struck, that's considered a shooting. So if a individual is not struck and a car is shot up or a house is shot up, does that go into the category of a shooting also?
It does not. If they shoot at a particular individual and he identifies himself as the victim, then it will go into the aggravated assault section. So it is counted as an aggravated assault, but it's not charged as an actual victim of a shooting. It's counted on the stats where you see the aggravated assaults, if they're a target, but not an actual shooting because they weren't hurt. But it is considered a violent category, and so that is tabulated as an assault with intent to kill, or if the victim comes forward and identifies himself as the target.
So you've noted the issue of cooperation. So in many of those cases, the victim doesn't come forward. So that hypothetically, there's a shooting, a car is shot up, the victim is not harmed. The victim doesn't come forward and identify their actual name, so that doesn't go into the aggravated assault category.
Not if we don't have a victim. We do have, you know, shots fired calls, unfortunately. I'm not going to lie to you. We have them more than we want. Kids, way too many guns on the street. I think over the last 2 weeks we've seen that. We must have got almost 15 guns. I think we've got almost 176 guns off the street. I think the officers are out there putting their lives on the line every day. But, you know, there's shots fired. Thank God nobody's hit in those cases. But, you know, we don't count someone firing a gun up in the air or someone firing into a car. We are working with the legislature to get the fines upped, that if someone shoots into a dwelling, you know, I think that's very serious right now. We don't have that charge, so we're always looking to, you know, different tools that basically firing a gun in the city is a stiffer penalty.
Yeah, I just think that means that we may not necessarily know the level of violence in the city based on the fact that this is actually being predicated on whether or not an individual is accurate in their shot or not. I think that becomes an issue. I guess the other question that I would have is around the night shift of detectives. So if you could, and I know that there's a collective bargaining.
We just answer that.
If I could just clarify on that, the statistical question. So we do have a means of tracking violent crime. So in looking at those Part 1 crime statistics that we provided right up front, so what you described, somebody's vehicle being shot up with them inside, that would fit into the category of an aggravated assault. So when we track and we talk about how many aggravated assaults there have been, which is a Part 1 crime, and whether or not violent crime is up or down, that is in fact contained within there. The shooting statistics is something separate that we track. That is, again, it's a subset of those aggravated assault numbers. So it's just a matter of whether or not somebody is actually struck or struck and killed, which would differentiate between an ABDW gun or a homicide, right? So technically, yes, we are tracking those types of incidents within our violent crime categories.
Because I think that's very important.
Very important.
Because oftentimes there are discharges. You have things like shot spotter that have varying levels of accuracy, but guns do get discharged, and it is important that we count them. I guess the other couple of questions I have is there what time do detectives get off? And would it make sense to have, and this is a resource issue also on the council side, a shift of detectives that would work 11 to 7? I'm told that detectives get off at 12. And so in the event that there was, and oftentimes when a shooting occurs, it occurs after 12 o'clock. What is the process currently? And does it make sense to have an additional shift?
Counsel, you looking for like a homicide unit and district detectives?
Yes.
I'll kind of explain it. So the homicide unit, they have an on-call schedule. Some weeks it rotates. They'll be on call 2 days in a row, and then one when the next, because they work 4 days on, 2 off. So the on-call, you have a day shift that works 8:30 to 5 in the homicide unit, and then you have 5 to 1. So every day you have on-call, like if it's your on-call and you come in at 5 o'clock, you work from 5 to 3 in the morning. So you'll be, your shift, if you weren't on call, would end at 1, but if you're on call, you have anything that comes in until 3 in the morning. And then if you're on call, if it's your day shift and you're on call, you'll have it from 3 in the morning till 8:30. And then you have the full day. So your day would start, if you were on call on the day shift, say tomorrow, it will start at 3 tomorrow morning. Then you'd be on call until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. District detectives, you said they get out, they have a day shift, 7:30 to 4 and 4 to midnight. What they do in the districts is typically the first half, in most of them, it's pretty standard throughout the districts. If you're going to have someone on call, they have people on call. So from they usually break it up 12 to 3, you have people that are available to come in. If you have an incident, you have a shooting or a homicide, they'll come in. And typically then if, whoever starts in the day, they'll pick it up from 3 in the morning till 7:30 in the morning. So any shooting, we have coverage from detectives. Their homicides, the district detectives come out, and they also assist the homicide unit with canvassing and processing and everything that goes along with that.
And I guess my last 2 questions are, how are the asset forfeiture funds distributed and used, and could they be used to help protect witnesses?
So if you want.
Sure. Counselor, there's a mini grant process. So half of the asset forfeiture money goes to the investigative agency, and then that's split between the prosecutorial office and the police department. If I'm correct, that's based on my memory. The other half, the district attorney, in our case, in Suffolk County, Dan Conley, administers a community RFP process and sends back that seized money back into the community based on an application process that many in the room may have been part of in the past. And there's a sliding scale of available funds. I don't remember what the minimum threshold of funding was, but I want to say from memory it was a mini grant of $2,500, and it may have gone up to somewhere in the range of $7,500, but it's reinvested back in the neighborhood.
Okay. And then I guess I will note that we did see an increase, and I know these are the first quarter versus first quarter, that first slide, but 2015 to 2016, there was a 23% increase in murders and 9% increase in rapes, and I think it was 39 to 49. I did want to note that year over year that we did see an increase. What I wanted to know was, do the street workers or any other organizations that you fund have resources to protect families and victims?
Again, the numbers for last year, we had actually 45 homicides in the year. 4 were classified during that year, but actual homicides in that year were 45. And the year prior was 39. So we were up 6 homicides technically. Street workers, they're a valuable asset out there.
And I will
there's
acknowledge, Sean Webb is here and will be
Yeah.
coming up right after
Okay.
you guys.
But they're a valuable asset out there, but they don't have the resources to provide protection at all. But, the homicide numbers, again, the year before, just to classify, we had almost a 20-year low when we hit 38. So, we went up slightly. The overall shootings were down 15%. I know there was talk they were up almost 80 shootings in that year, but the actual shootings were down 15. And again, we had almost a 20-year low in 2015. We had a great summer last year. October and November, we had 12 homicides. If we didn't have a bad October and November, last year would have beat the year before, and it would have brought us even probably a 25-year low. So,
Commissioner?
we're going to work harder this year. We're not satisfied with any homicide out there, but again, across this country, I think comparing us to any city, we have a very safe city.
Commissioner, can you explain the classified component, that drag, the 4?
Yeah, I think 2 of the homicides, and probably Greg can talk about it, happened in 2014, and the ME classified them in last year as homicide. I think one was in 2000. One was in maybe, right, Greg?
As far as classifying them, it's, unified crime reporting. It's the statistics that get reported out to the FBI. So if someone was shot, say 2 years ago, and the ME doesn't rule it a homicide until this year in 2017, even though it took place 2 years ago, that homicide would count for 2017. That's how they report.
Thank you. Councilor Flaherty?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, did you say 76 guns or 176?
107.
Is that year-to-date, or is that from?
That's 3 months into the year.
That's tremendous. Tremendous work. Superintendent Long, I think the statistic you had was 15 out of 32. So 15 victims out of 32.
36 out of 30. It was 15 out of 36 that year.
15 out of 36 just refused to cooperate whatsoever, even though that they knew who shot them, or may have had an idea who shot them.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't even get that far because they just, like I said, it was an out-and-out refusal to cooperate.
And then in a retaliatory situation, is there any way to correlate how many of those 15 were then involved in retaliatory shootings?
No, I mean, I think a fair amount of our victims in some districts, they're known, they're in our gang database, and, I couldn't provide you with that statistic, but you typically see the retaliation if, the victim's on one side. You typically at some point see the retaliation in a rival area at some point.
Okay. When I was in the DA's office, we would use the grand jury and would also do the direct indictment. So did we get away from that, or are we using it strategically? How would you classify it?
The topic has come up lately, and that's a conversation we're having with the district attorney's office now. I think trying to get back to that type of philosophy to help out in those cases.
And one man's opinion, I don't have all the details and facts, I only have what I read, but I think that would be sort of a perfect situation when it's unconscionable for me as a father to realize that there's someone's child was shot and don't seem to be coming forward or being cooperative. And I think that's a situation where bringing that person right immediately before the grand jury may result in us getting some names of individuals that were involved in that shooting before other people, other mothers, lose a child, or other children go without parents. So I would put that of paramount importance, that those are situations where I think, and when I was in the DA's office, we would use that as a very tactful tool to make sure that we got that information as quickly as possible. So if that could be something that we revisit, either through the grand jury process or the direct indictment process, I think that would be very helpful. And then just finally, on the statistics piece, this is something I've talked about for the longest time. We're so fortunate to be in Boston and to have the best hospitals in the world, and we actually have one of the best trauma units and some of the best trauma surgeons in the world right here. So when an incident happens, that person's on that operating table within a matter of minutes, and that's the difference between life and death. And I've always said that if we weren't so close to the Boston City Hospital Trauma Division, that our death toll would be a lot higher. And just for your statistics, if there's a way in future studies, if you could just backdrop where those medical facilities are for the Seattles and the Denvers and the Oklahoma cities, I would be curious to see whether or not from our hospital standpoint that that's also helping us make a difference, the great work that our police department's doing, but also our medical institutions being in such close proximity to where a lot of these shootings are happening. I think that makes a huge difference in whether someone lives or dies. And I just don't know with this, you had showed us a whole bunch of cities where we stack up.
Sure.
Not only locally, but nationally. And I would be real curious to see where those medical institutions are to where those hotspots are.
Okay.
And if it's within 3, 4, 5 minutes, just like we are, that it's apples to apples. But if it's a 25-minute ambulance ride for one of those individuals in one of those other cities, that's a game changer.
Agreed.
from
I'll
a
take
staff
that with me back to
standpoint.
the office.
But I appreciate your time and attention. Could continue to work with you guys and continue to work with the community. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Councilor Asabi George?
Thank you. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Chair, for putting together quite the audience and the panels that now and ahead. I'm curious about the clearance rates that were on the PowerPoint versus, are they current cases? Is there an average timeline on solve rates as opposed to just, what's that measurement? How is that data calculated?
As far as the clearance rates you saw for the non-fatal shootings, so for 2016, those are the cases, that's the percentage that have been cleared of those cases in 2016.
Of 2016
Yeah, that doesn't
cases.
mean those cases, some of those cases are currently in the grand jury that we hope to, obviously charge someone with that. So, obviously, it actively continues. And, if we were to make an arrest tomorrow in a case, obviously, on a 2016, that percentage obviously would go up. Those homicide cases, the
So
same.
that's a dynamic number on 2016. That's
Yes.
currently updating based
Yes.
on those years.
Yes.
So is there any longer study that we've done so we could have a better look at sort of close rates over a longer period of time, clearance rates?
I think Anthony Braga, who has done some studies for the Boston Police Department, he has looked into that. We've had conversations about that. I think the conversation we've had with the homicide unit in clearance rates as it pertains from a year-to-year basis is, if you have, I'll give you a number, say you had 15 homicides in December. I mean, your chances of making arrests in any of those, it's obviously not high, but yet, as far as your clearance rate for that year, that could affect, your clearance rate one way or another. Whereas, if you had, he did look at the study, whatever time frame it is from the date of the incident out, he has been looking into that.
So that would be very interesting to me to sort of see that data over time, because I think that's more meaningful. But I am happy to hear that it is a dynamic number as it stands now. Is there any information on the types of cases any analysis on the types of cases that clear quicker than others that you could share with us? Because I'm sure, I guess I don't know what's easier to solve and what sort of the markers are of cases that are more difficult or easier to solve.
I mean, I'm just gonna be honest with you. I mean, the ones we've cleared, cooperation right off the bat. I know that's simplifying it, but when we make these cases, it's because we have fantastic cooperation from victims and/or witnesses. Like I said, there's some cases, circumstantially, it's not that easy to, you have video, the video's not always great, you don't get plates on cars, doing it without witnesses, and, even if you have video of a certain car, you need witnesses to corroborate that, and there's a whole process. Then you see a car trying to track a car down, then if you get to the car, people that own the car, then cooperation from them. At the end of the day, throughout any investigation, like cooperation and people being, willing to talk to us is essential.
I'm good for now. Thank you very much.
Councilor Wu?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'm going to keep it short because I know we want to hear from a lot of folks. And my colleagues have already asked great questions about data, so I'm just going to leave all the number stuff aside. So first, thank you all for what you do and to all your officers for what you do. I think, numbers aside, what we hear on the elected official side is often around perceptions of safety and trust, and whether or not a particular person trusts and wants to work with the officers who are there after an incident depends not just on that interaction, but every other interaction they or their community has had with the city in general. So I'm just wondering, from a constituent service point of view, who is the single point of contact from the administration side of when someone is afraid and needs help, even before something might happen, or their family is in need of something related to public safety? Who should they be reaching out to, and what's the bureaucracy look like on that?
Well,
end?
again, they can call any station and speak to, whether it be, the sergeant, the lieutenant, the captain, or any detective for that matter. I had the case recently with Counselor Jackson. He had someone who was afraid to go into District 2's police station, and he didn't have the best experience, so Counselor Jackson called me, and I set it up so our detectives met this individual in Counselor Jackson's office. That happened a couple of weeks ago. So we'll make arrangements for people if they feel afraid, and we'll do whatever we can to cover them. So, we're accessible. And that's why we're out there all the time. That's why we're in the public schools at the early age. We're out in the community centers. We're engaged in youth dialogues to break down the barriers. So people and young kids aren't afraid to come in and know that we're approachable. But, that if anyone doesn't feel safe, we'll gladly come to them if they feel intimidated coming into the station.
And is that the best point of contact? I mean, there are all these resources spread across different levels of government and agencies, in the DA's office and BHA and this and that. And, we hear stories of folks being directed to call here and then here and then here and then here. Do you recommend reaching out to BPD directly? Is it the Office of Public Safety in City Hall? What's the ideal?
I mean, our community service offices, to tell you the truth, are the best to do. Most stations have one sergeant and 4, 5, 6 guys. They're sort of our constituent services, and they're very accessible.
And they'll coordinate across everything.
They'll get in touch with the detectives if it's an investigation, or if it has to rise to our level. But we have 11 districts, and we have plenty of people out there doing the constituency services.
I might just add, Council Wu, so it's really case by case, depending on, you're going to hear from a panel across the board in here, and there's many people that are in the direct service universe. The mayor began a Safe City Co-op meeting shortly after he moved into office that includes probably 20, 25 citywide agencies. The idea behind that was to remove any excuses not to communicate to the right people. And I think if you have additional questions specific to that, it most likely, the experts will most likely tell you that it's those that are most engaged with that person that you've identified to help them with the warm handoffs.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been an issue that's been traditionally challenging to direct someone to a phone number. And my sense is that we've gotten a lot better at that over the last several years.
Thank you very much.
And Counselor as well, just look about the room. When we talk about partnerships, anyone in this room that we work with, if someone wants to contact them for our services, they do that and they get back to us. I mean, I've talked to counselors about helping out people. The thing we want to get across to everyone, that we're approachable and we're here for you. That's our job. And whether the person wants to interact with us personally or through another party, clergy, street workers, counselors, we're here.
Thank you, panel. I'm going to move on to the second. So thank you for being here. Thank you for the presentation. These things will be made public online, and there are copies of some presentations, physical copies as well. So if you're interested in grabbing one, you can head over to the right. Now I'm going to call up the next folks. So let's see, Sean Webb. Roy Martin, and thank you guys for your patience. Charlene Luma, Andrea Perry, Catherine Fine, and then Freddie.
This is a three. Yeah, that's three. So just the community panels out.
Yeah, we're going to keep going. Yep, we're going to keep going. Because we still have the community panel, so that will happen. And I'm going to try to keep us moving along and brief so that we get to that panel and then public testimony. Okay, thank you. We started. We can be close.
Oh, my fault.
Okay, thank you. So, Sean, I'll start with you since we were just mentioning the street workers. I'd ask everyone maybe to just give a few minutes, and literally a few minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions from our colleagues here. Just first, your name for the record, the organization you represent, and the work that you do. That would be very helpful. Thank you. And thank you for your patience.
Well, thank you for having me. My name is Sean Webb, Youth Services Division Director for Boston Centers for Youth and Families and Director of the Street Workers Program.
Roy Martin, I'm the Director of Safe and Successful Youth Initiative Programming and at the Boston Public Health Commission. I operate out of Division of Violence Prevention. Thank you.
I would say, actually, you can just jump in, so Sean can just start talking. And then once it gets to you, feel free to give your introduction, including your name. Thank you. Thanks, Sean.
Well, no, I'm fine. The Street Workers Program is a division of the Boston Centers for Youth and Families, the Youth Services Division. We are on the intervention and gang intervention and prevention side of the shop. On the other side of the shop is 35 community centers across the city, 2 or more youth workers in every community center that really provide more of that day-to-day prevention-based work. Street workers, do the yeoman's work of really being in the community and really engaging some of the more proven risk individuals. We have an active caseload of 725 young folks. We target the most active 45 groups in the city of Boston. We work alongside this wonderful collaboration of partners where street workers play the credible role model in the lives of really young, impressionable, gang-involved, and proven risk individuals. We're the point guard, if you look at it from the basketball analogy, in terms of identifying the resources and coordinating amongst the partnership in terms of resources and opportunity. Our lens in terms of impact and violence really has more on the advocacy side. As I look around the room, I see many families that we've worked with that we're still connected to. And we play that chief role of really staying involved in the individuals' lives long-term, not just short-term. We're not a short-term endeavor, we're a long-term endeavor. And I'll be very happy to answer whatever questions the council may have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
My name is Roy Martin. First of all, I'm a resident of the city of Boston. I was born here. I'm a parent here. I'm a grandparent here. Went to school here. I've been in trouble here. And I actually am employed to work in our neighborhood. I say all the time, the neighborhood is my boss. The Public Health Commission is my employer. So anytime the neighborhood wants to, the neighborhood could ask me to leave, and I will gladly leave. So my assignment, I am the director of the Safe and Successful Youth Initiative Programming in the city of Boston. And what that is, it is a focus on the 300 or so individuals that the Boston Police Department identifies and They're identified as the persons most likely to either shoot or be shot. And so one challenge we have with that programming is that there are times when folks feel as though they could volunteer a name and say, you know, here's someone that I believe it would be good for you to work with, or here's someone that I think, you know, he's having some challenges, but if they are not identified by BPD as one of the persons that, you know, and given some of the data and the statistics that we're seeing, if they are not identified as one of the persons likely to be responsible for that, then they won't be a part of our service strategy. So we're funded by the Executive Office of Health and Human Service out of the state, and I'm looking at Rep. Tyler right now, so thank you very much. And we are managed by the City of Boston and primarily in concert with the Office of Public Safety. And so what we do is we do outreach via Sean Webb's shop at the Street Worker Program primarily, and then in the secondary and tertiary sense, we do outreach also at Boston Medical Center. Based off the population we deal with, they're also likely to be victims of violent crime, and so we do in-reach kind of at Boston Medical Center. And then we also are connected with South Bay House of Correction because it is likely that these individuals may be in and out of trouble. And so part of our function is to connect with these individuals and then, you know, meaningful case management services in, you know, our relationship with these individuals. Now, we don't use that word in its colloquial sense, case management. Case management for us is something completely different than what I think the general public thinks it is. So it does start with a real ISP. It does have assessments. It does have safety protocols in place. And then at the end, we're looking for an outcome as directed by the client. Now, the ultimate objective is to work with these individuals so that they do not continue on the path that we found them or we were connected with them on, and hopefully developmentally get them to make a different choice. Now, there are times when we may even contribute to some of the lack of case closure because we're asking guys to not retaliate and to just move on with your life. And so we've started this process in 2010, and I was looking at the data that was on the board by the BRIC, and that year saw the highest range of homicides in a long time in the city. I think that graphic had 70 homicides. So we started in 2010, working directly with the persons they say are likely to be a part of that cohort. Those numbers have dropped dramatically, so I believe in collaboration with everyone on the stage that we have had some impact on the amount of Part 1 crimes in the form of homicides and shootings in and around the city. Now, it certainly is a challenge because we know there could be 3,500 young persons on that list. But if we were given a list of 3,500, we would probably just run from the list. No one would take that on. That is an amazing task for anyone to believe they could have some difference with. So obviously all of us have to get together. We got to tie our hands and our strings together with other individuals. I'm looking at one right now from a particular organization, and also members of the community. So at the end of the day, clearly all of us as a community feel the impact of the violence. We understand if we don't swim upstream, which is pretty much the public health approach, if we don't swim upstream and get to the root of the problem, all we're going to be doing is responding to these incidents of violence. So we need to get right to the individuals that we know can cause a large-scale ripple or outbreak in the city of Boston. If we do that in a meaningful way, then I think we can really reduce violence. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Charlene Luma, and I'm the Program Director for the Boston Trauma Response Team through SMART Team at the Justice Resource Institute, and I will be brief. So the Boston Trauma Response Team provides rapid response to homicides and community violence affecting people 13 to 24 years old. We provide them with short-term case management, psychological first aid, coping groups, and some short-term and long-term therapy. So our team consists of some volunteers and clinical professionals who've been trained. We are available 24/7, 365 a year, and we have capacity to respond to emergencies within 30 minutes of receiving notification. So we have capacity in our team of Spanish and Haitian Creole. So We were established in July 2015, and since then, we've serviced over 400 individuals and responded to over 30 community incidents. Incidents include community meetings following a homicide, vigils, funerals, home visits, as well as making referrals to other organizations. Last year, we sat before the council and requested that there were efforts around making sure that there was coordinated community and collaborative response to trauma response. Since then, we have partnered with the Boston Public Health Commission as a mobile vendor. And now when I think about what's been the most effective and essential in providing trauma services, it has really been the coordinated response approach. We've coordinated with everybody who's on this panel this evening. It has allowed us to provide families more efficient and effective services. This includes connecting to the police department and utilizing street workers, especially when there are issues of safety that families bring to us. We also are able to connect families to other mental health providers, such as Whittier Street Health Center, as well as Bowdoin Street Health Center. We also have been able to really address the needs that people often bring to us when addressing trauma, which includes housing requests through BHA and other partners. In the past year and a half of providing trauma services, what has been apparent is that the coordination of care is instrumental in addressing trauma needs of young people and their families throughout the city of Boston. We recognize there are many partners, such as the Boston Public Health Commission, the Boston Center for Youth and Families, specifically the Street Workers Program, the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute, the PIM Project, the Police Department, the District Attorney's Office, and many other providers are essential to building and sustaining resiliency from exposure to traumatic events. Also, following an event, individuals that are provided tools to adapt to tools and support are necessary to adapt to the reaction of trauma and return to normal experiences. As we continue to move forward and provide trauma services, we encourage the council to support the following. 1, a streamlined notification system for incidents related to homicide and those that result in non-fatal injuries. 2, development of a response protocol that is universal and accessible to community members and providers. And finally, ongoing support for those that provide trauma response services. So we often talk about providing services to the victims, but the truth of the matter is that if the providers are not receiving support themselves and they're not being taken care of, then they can't do the work. So I'm hoping that as we move forward to really consider more coordinated responses, that we're also making sure that the providers, that includes the street workers, the police officers, the mental health providers, community activists, that they're getting their needs met as well. Thank you for your consideration, and I look forward to continuing our collaborative partnership.
Hi, good evening. My name is Andrea Perry. I'm the Executive Director of Youth Connect. We are a program of the Boys and Girls Clubs of Boston, and for the past 20 years have been a partnership with the Boston Police Department. We are master's level social workers who sit directly inside 8 different locations across the BPD to reach out to young people that the officers are concerned about. There is an arrest, there is not arrest, it really doesn't matter. It's really officer concerned. So for the past 20 years, we started originally back in the B3 station in Mattapan, and from there we have grown. Currently we are in B2, which is Roxbury, B3, which is Mattapan and parts of Dorchester, C11, which is large parts of Dorchester, D4, which is the south end and parts of Roxbury, E13, which is Jamaica Plain. We are also in the school police unit, the Youth Violence Strike Force, otherwise known as the gang unit, and as of last September, we are in the domestic violence unit. And I think our scope is a little broader. I feel like our partners on the table have a kind of a laser focus on a certain population. We really mean officer concern, and so it really runs from young people who are involved in gangs. We're talking about young people who are victims of community violence. We are talking about kids who are using drugs, selling drugs, kids who are truant during school hours. There are parents who bring their kids into the station to say, help me. And if those are a station where Youth Connect is at, we get called to the lobby to try to provide assistance. I think some of the key elements of Youth Connect is that we're voluntary. The police department makes the referral, but nobody can make you work with Youth Connect. It is up to the family. We are also confidential. While we are inside the police department, we do not report back to the police or anybody for that matter. We are licensed social workers and confidentiality does apply. We are free. There is no charge. We don't rely on insurance. We are, have a variety of funding sources that don't dictate how we may provide assistance. And that assistance can take several different forms. It could look like individual therapy. It could look like family therapy. We do a lot of clinical case management, and as Roy mentioned, it really does start with that assessment. It's who's involved, what's working, what are you hoping for, what are strengths that already exist within your family that we can build upon, who are you already connected to so we're not duplicating roles, and we can be efficient in our efforts to help support you. We do a lot of legal advocacy within the courts, talking to both the DA and the defense attorney to best help kind of explain the situation and kind of hold the voice for the family if they are having trouble articulating what they need. Inside Boston Public Schools, how to really make sure that kids' educational needs are getting met. I keep saying family because we really do take a family approach. We firmly believe that young people are impacted by their family. We have all been impacted by our family, sometimes negatively, sometimes positively. And so we are not limited to just work with a young person. We have the availability and the flexibility and the skill set to say, you know, our primary work might be with a parent or guardian to help support him or her in their efforts. That might be their own depression, their own trauma history, their own substance abuse. It might be learning how to set better limits as a parent or how to think about budgeting so the food doesn't run out at the end of the month. And we also look at siblings, knowing that, you know, siblings are often influenced by their older brother or sister, and how can we think about preventative services that we can put in place so that, you know, if they need to go to after-school program, there's money for it. If we can help them find a summer job, if they need educational advocacy or they're already involved in courts or probation, we can help there. And I'd say lastly, every social worker reaches out to about 120 families a year. So right now, we have 8 frontline social workers. That's talking about 800 young people, 800 families in the year. And shockingly, I've been doing this work for 17 years at this program. I actually started as the social worker in Mattapan many years ago. Families want the help, and we know that. People are willing to talk to us over the phone, even though they haven't met us, because families want help. Everybody wants better for their kids. And I think one of the things that has made us most impactful is that we do have relationships. Every single person on the stage, and some people who aren't here tonight, some people who are out in the audience, really do understand that we have a particular role that we can play if people would like us, but I'm more than happy to, you know, let Freddie and Freddie Shop take the lead and let it run with it, and they call us if they'd like our help. I guess my recommendation for everybody kind of in the room in closing would be, I think we're very fortunate to be in a city that understands the impact of trauma and the different forms of trauma that a young person can experience, and that usually for a lot of the young people we're working with, that can be multiple forms of trauma. There might have been domestic violence in the house. They might have been a victim of violence themselves. They might have also witnessed violence. It's usually not a single episode. And I think as a city, we very much understand that. I'd also suggest that we all be very cautious before in our efforts to be helpful and supportive to bombard families. And that efforts really continue to be coordinated, and that coordination keeps enhancing so that families in their most difficult times are not getting promised things that can't happen, are just having a hard time remembering and kind of negotiating all the people that are involved, and that it really continues to be even more coordinated than it already is right now. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Freddie Velez. I'm the Director of Youth Options Limited Boston. We're located in Dudley Square, right across from the Bruce Bowling Building on 7 Palmer Street. We're a youth program that works with young people between the ages of 14 to 24. We provide 3 essential services: provide case management services, education support, and job placement. We service about 300 youth annually. They're referred to us by our partnering organizations, some of the folks here at the table. Boston Centers for Youth and Families, Juvenile and Adult Probation, Suffolk County House of Correction, and other community-based partners. We predominantly work with young people who are gang involved and or court involved, and again, providing the 3 key essential services. One of the things that we're most noted for over the last couple of years in partnership with Boston Police Department, the Office of Public Safety, Dan Shop, and Centers for Youth and Families are Operation Exit, where we've placed 49 young folks from the community, all of which have been in some way, shape, or form involved in the criminal justice system, either through incarceration and or other matters. Taking those 49 young folks, all have been identified as heavily gang-involved individuals by Sean and his shop, and placing them into life-changing wages into the unions. So out of the 49 folks, we placed 42 directly into the unions, all making above a livable wage. So when you talk about violence and interrupting violence, there's no better way to interrupt violence other than educating and giving folks a real opportunity to make a change in their lives, not only for themselves, but for their families. So when talking about this, this was something that was a coordinated effort, again, through the Boston Police Department and also the Office of Public Safety, as well as Boston Centers for Youth and Families. The mayor was fully supportive of this initiative. In addition to just this initiative, we also expanded Operation Exit to have other career tracks, because not all young people want to get into the building trades. They also have other ideas. Some folks were interested in culinary arts and or coding. We began those career tracks. In addition, other folks wanted to do work in the public sector, if you could believe it or not, right? So the mayor opened up his doors and said to all of his departments to take on an intern. So we placed 14 young folks, again, the same population that we're talking about, in City Hall in entry-level positions as interns. Out of the 14, 10 completed the program and 9 were placed in jobs. The 10th person decided to go back to college, and that's exactly what we want, right? And I should say, out of those folks, out of all the initiatives, over 80% of the young folks resided in Dorchester, Roxbury, and or Mattapan. And again, the average age was about 22 years old and had some type of involvement. So again, YO, in partnership with the folks in this room, have really dedicated themselves to providing real opportunities to young folks so that they could move away from the violence that has brought us here today, and really make change not only for themselves, but for their families and enlarge their communities. So I'll close with that.
Thank you.
All right.
I would just say be brief, quick.
I'm going to try to be as quick as I can. Good evening. My name is Catherine Fine. I'm the Director of the Division of Violence Prevention for the Boston Public Health Commission. I work very closely with Roy Martin, and he's described a program of ours at the commission. And this evening, I'd like to share with you some of the work that we're doing around trauma response and recovery, which is a new strategy for us. And I'd like to also describe to you some of the changes that we've made as a result of really investing in community listening sessions and hearing from residents about what they wanted to see in services that attend to the impact of trauma and what residents told us they need. So this past summer, we held 14 listening sessions across Dorchester, Mattapan, Roxbury, Jamaica Plain, and East Boston. We heard from 350 residents, parents, young people, some providers, and we really, again, asked them, what is it that you'd like to see in a strategy to address trauma? And residents told us first what their concerns were. They said that they felt that the city's response to trauma was good but uneven, and they didn't always know when and how to access services. Residents told us that it was important to have very immediate support for families and for individuals. And they felt that it was important that the community as a whole was attended to. So when an event happens in a neighborhood, to make sure that there's visibility, that residents who may not be part of the immediate family or friend circle but are deeply impacted by an event, know how to get connected and know that the city is there and the city cares. And then residents told us as well that it was really important to have ongoing services. So it may not, someone may be impacted by an event, but it may not be the time for them. They may decide, as Andrea said, it's not the time for me to engage in something and I'm okay for right now, but 2 weeks later, 6 months later, 6 years later, they may want to get connected to some sort of support, and that it was really critical for us to make sure that we offered that full continuum. This wasn't all new information, but it was really, really helpful to get it in this way and to really make sure that these were resident-led groups. We really asked and invited residents to lead the conversation and to make sure that we weren't kind of sort of prescribing a set of services before we heard from residents. So as a result of that process, we released an RFP for funding for 5 neighborhood trauma teams. 3 of those neighborhood trauma teams are currently funded, and I'm really thrilled. The leaders of those teams, many of the leaders of those teams are in this room this evening, and I hope you'll have a chance to hear from them. I'm trying to be brief, so I'm skipping over a few things. Ask me questions later. These teams are funded right now in Dorchester, Jamaica Plain, and Roxbury. They are funded to provide immediate short-term crisis response for individuals and families. They are funded, again, to attend to the community as a whole, to be very visible and following an event, to make sure that they are out in the neighborhood flyering, door knocking, getting connected to residents and sharing with residents resources. They are working with us to create safe spaces for residents to come together for healing and to learn about resources and also to provide ongoing recovery and care. The other element to this new strategy is that we've partnered very closely with Charlene and her team. Charlene described for you all of the work that they do. We now, in partnership with the JRI Smart team, have a 24-hour, 365-day-a-week hotline that is private and confidential, and Charlene and her staff are available to answer that phone within 20 to 30 minutes. They'll have a call back for anybody who wants to talk or wants to get connected to a resource. So we are hopeful that this is the first step in assuring a more even and responsive continuum of care for Boston residents and communities that are impacted in trauma. We know that there is still more work to do. We know that the city needs to improve its notification system to assure that all residents who need services can receive them as soon as they are ready, and ready being the key aspect there. And we are continually working with our partners in BPD, BPS, BCYF, the mayor's office, and really just figuring out strategies for ongoing resident feedback to make sure that we are building a system and a set of services that are really supporting healing and thriving. So we would love to hear your questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think anyone has any questions on this side. So I will say this, because obviously this is a lot of information at once, and I think it's important for community to see that there are incredible resources in the city of Boston. So if you guys could leave any information that you have with you so people can take that information with them, process it, be able to connect with you, call you, follow up on things that are specific to their needs, or their concerns, or those of folks they know in the community, that would be extremely helpful. Obviously, information related to city employees is on the web, so whether it's the Health Commission, the City Council, the City of Boston generally, you can find contact information for folks on the web. And I will acknowledge Damone, who is in the back here, but because he wants to make sure we have adequate time for the community, he's not going to speak, but I will tell you he handles many things, but also the Shannon Grant, and has done some really impressive things around shaping a committee to give out that money in a more objective way to make sure that majority of the money that we get in the city of Boston for that grant goes to organizations, actually goes to the street, and less with us. So I just wanted to quickly acknowledge him. He will also be here if you have specific questions about that. But now I'm going to actually ask those who are on the community panel to come up. And I want to thank you guys for the work that you do together. as individuals, as individual organizations. And obviously, this is one of hopefully many hearings to come. But if you have questions or specific things, feel free to ask folks to the right. But now at this point, I want to call up Monica Cannon, Rufus Falk, Adrian Major. Are you on this panel? Killer's not on this panel. Killer's not on this panel?
Yes.
Killer, are you on the panel? Do you want to say a few words, or you want to wait for the public testimony part? It's up to you. Okay. And I'll call you first after they wrap up. Okay. Oh, and before we jump into the community panel, I want to acknowledge Representative China Tyler, who's been in the audience all night long, and I couldn't see her at first, sitting behind one of my team members. So thank you for being here. She obviously represents Roxbury, and she's doing an incredible job at the State House, so thank you. So obviously, time is moving, but I want to make sure that I give you guys an opportunity to have opening statements, a few minutes each, and then we'll ask questions if we have any, and then we'll go into public testimony.
Okay,
So
so-
you guys can go, Monica, in whatever order you guys want.
That's cool. I'm also going to hand
Thank
you
you.
a printout of all the homicides for 2016.
Oh, thank you. No.
Okay. So first, I want to say good evening. Thank you to the council members for holding this hearing. I also want to highlight that it's very disheartening that the community gets this short amount of time, given the fact that this is community-based and this is happening in our community. I believe that the community should have had more time.
I'm in no rush.
It's cool. So I have a statement. I'm going to read my statement. Whatever questions you have after it, we can be sure to answer
And Monica,
it.
don't feel rushed.
Okay. Not at all. You're not supposed to be so blind with patriotism that you can't face reality. Wrong is wrong, no matter who says it. I implore the mayor, the city of Boston, and the city council to realize that your obligation is to the community that elected you and not your relationships, friendships, or alliances. Please stop playing defense to communities' grievances and listen to hear instead of respond. Are we saying that crime plaguing our communities is all the police, the mayor, and the city's fault? No, that is not what we're saying. What we're saying is that you all know what works, but continue to funnel money into broken systems. From the 90s, when the Boston Miracle took place, the city of Boston and the Boston Police Department, as well as the community, knew what it took to prevent crime in the city of Boston. But due to all the federal funding in this city received under the hashtag Boston Miracle, decided that money was more important than prevention. Why? Which is why in 2015, $318 million was given to the Boston Police Department and only $1 million was given to street workers. Street workers whose job it is to assist in preventing violence, who currently don't have the tools they need to offer young people who aren't walking into community centers a way out. The Boston Police Department, AKA the gatekeepers, oversee funding for 22 organizations receiving funding under the Shannon Grant for violence prevention work without a report card or an assessment tool, letting the community know who they're servicing, what those services look like, and what are those outcomes. Per reports, Boston police officers are making $200,000 to $400,000 a year, with a 96% failure rate for solving non-fatal shootings for victims under the age of 17, yet continue to receive funding. Name one job you can work and fail 96% of the time, receive more money, not be fired, and your boss refused to talk about it. Roxbury has a median income of $28,899. It's 32.3% below poverty level and being heavily gentrified. Our issue is economics. When our mayor and commissioner get in the media and dehumanize our community, what is actually happening is they are victimizing the victims. Would you tell a rape victim that they were raped because of the clothing that they wear? Would you tell Amy Lord's family from South Boston the same thing? In fact, in Amy Lord's case, the community demanded a meeting with elected officials in the Boston Police Department, and they sat in that space with over 300 community members for over 3 hours and let them voice their concerns in a way that was not so nice. Making statements like 2 suspects are apprehended in the bowling building due to a shooting, when one was a victim with his mother, signing up for school and was defending himself, and he was not arrested. And it wasn't until I went live on social media and called one elected official in particular for the family to receive trauma services. That is unacceptable. Or when you make statements like gang involved, or why won't the father speak up? Meanwhile, Martin Richards, who was murdered in the Boston Marathon, received trauma response to his home, to his school, a detail officer, and they blocked his street off to give his family time to grieve. About $70,000 of witness protection money went unused year before last. And even though there were several cases that warranted it, also noted that the person who was in charge of approving witness protection money is the prosecutor. What protections are you offering to communities of color to cooperate? The fear of retribution from the streets is far worse than the police. The fact that BPD and city officials expect the community to trust them is absurd considering the outrageous attacks launched against the community in the media. Facts. Parents and community members are stepping up and being told, get somewhere safe. What do you want us to do? Or we, meaning the Boston Police Department, are tired of being blamed for stuff. Facts. Our issue isn't a lack of funding and programming. Our issue is that the funding and programming are not allocated to our communities, or they have to contact 25 people to get help. But this isn't something that the city or these elected officials don't know. Nothing in the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. Communities of color are fearful of the same things that majority communities are fearful of. The difference is that you put all of us in one area on top of each other, so we're living in a war zone. But I challenge you to drop your child off in Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan after 9 o'clock, go home and then tell me crime is down. Most young people want a way out, but no one has created one. We are no longer submitting to the city or the mayor in an effort to get assistance. We are creating our own assistance for our communities while we hold you accountable. The same crime element that police officers and the majority of the population are fearful, people of color are also fearful of. The difference is those suffering from mental illness, convicted of rape or murder, come home to our communities with little or no services or follow-up. Our young men don't want to kill, they just don't want to die. Lastly, I would say that the same people that say the system works, work for the system.
Thank you, Monica.
That's good. I love you too.
Rufus, thank you, Monica. Thank you. Thank you.
I think what Sister Monica spoke to is just a feeling of being fed up and a feeling that we've been going
Rufus.
through this process.
I know Monica stated, can you state your name?
I'm sorry, my name is Rufus J. Falk, Program Director for the Boston 10-Point Coalition. Again, this has been a recurring theme for us. For those of us who live in Roxbury, we've been going to funerals, we've been going to vigils for 30-plus years now, and the question is, how do we change it? And I think the frustration that Sister Monica's talked is a frustration I hear every day, and a frustration that I saw on Sunday when you're on Copeland Street, a street that I grew up on. I'm seeing people just feeling with that dazed and confused look of here we go again. And the question is, how do we hold those in positions of power accountable? But again, how do we put the people who are on the ground in positions to actually make some change happen? Because unfortunately, for us, for Boston 10 Point, we deal with unintended consequences of bad policy. People who create policies who have no context to what's actually happening in the community. So when you do a sweep, you sweep Humboldt Avenue, you take all the guys who were gang involved and you leave a void there, then other people just fill those voids, and then we're left to pick up the pieces without having the resources to get people out. I've been doing this work since 2005. I was 23. Nobody gave me a manual to do the work. I went to 43 funerals from 2005, 2007 to the point that I didn't want to do the work anymore. And there was no support for me. So we had to do a different strategy. We knew that we couldn't be citywide where we were trying to be at every event. At every funeral, at every visual, we were trying to be present. And then once you leave an incident, you're going to the next one. So you're going from Wilson Street, then you're going to Ashmont. And there's no way to sort of quantify if you're being effective or not. So I said we got to be more place-based. So since 2014, we decided to be place-based. We're strictly focusing on Roxbury, looking at the cooperatives, looking at St. Joseph's, Warren Gardens, Marksdale, Shawnee 1 and 2, and Humboldt Avenue, and also Academy Homes, to say the only way to be sustainable, to sustainably address these issues, is to build strong communities. Focusing on violence, shootings could stop tomorrow and our neighborhood's still gonna have the same issues. People are still gonna be unemployed. People are still gonna be able to get pushed out. So we gotta focus on things that the root cause that's actually causing the violence. So we decided to do other things outside of doing the intervention work, because that's still necessary, but we decided to make sure we're providing summer camps for people who can't afford it. Because summer camp's expensive if you got 3 kids and you're making $28,000. Because the Boys Club isn't $5 a year like it was when I was going in Roxbury Boys and Girls Club. So what do? So we had to try to do other things to sort of intercede where people had issues. So we're doing summer camps. We had a partnership with DCR and Monia Cass to make sure we're feeding people. Because in the summertime, you don't know how beneficial a burger and a hot dog could be to somebody who hasn't eaten, or hasn't had a meal in 4 hours, 5 hours. So we try to do those things that actually lead to safe communities, because a safe community is a community that's actually provided for, that has resources, that has access. So that's what we've been trying to do. We still continue to do the gang mediation work. We still could do that direct intervention work. But the real sustainable work that we believe is actually fully funding our communities and providing resources that unfortunately they're not receiving right now. So that's what we're doing. And again, there should have been 100 people on Copeland Street yesterday, not just from Roxbury. I saw about 4. Should have been 100 people on it. You had a 6-year-old baby get shot, and we're asking the questions about what the father's doing. A father that I grew up with, who has the same name as me, so it hit me a little different. Because the only difference between me and him is I had access. I grew up on the same street, but I tested well. So I was able to go to Latin Academy. He had to go to a different school. I was able to then go to Temple and go to other schools. But we're the same kid. We were doing the same things. He just got caught. That's the only separation. So we got to start looking at violence or people who are gang involved as if they are just bad people. Because we've all made decisions and the streets are addictive. So we got to tackle that. So what makes somebody want to gain their identity by attaching themselves to the street is they don't see another avenue for themselves to sort of build that self-identity. So we, as adults, got to build that for them. How do we celebrate the kids who aren't the kids shooting? We never do that. How often do we celebrate the kids who are graduating? The kids who are part of the torch program? We never do that. The media never comes out. I call them out every time. You call me for a shooting every time, but you never call me when we do Save Our Streets at Jeep Jones Park. I can never get you there. We give away 1,000 toys, thousands of toys every Christmas. We have to beg the media to come out, beg elected officials to come out. They never come out. So those things that we have to do as a community, and again, we're trying. We have limited resources. We have limited people who are on the ground. The laborers are few, but the work's plentiful. But again, it's about accountability on both sides. And how do we hold the people we've elected accountable, the people who are paid accountable, but as a community, we have to be accountable to one another, and that's what we got to start doing more of.
Thank you, Rufus. Adrian, can you just state your name and your affiliation for the record before you jump in? Thank you.
My name is Adrian Major from Dreamcatcher Initiative, a part of Violence in Boston. My biggest issue here is that I believe just enough is enough. I feel like money is funded into things that should be better, and we can look at a systemic value of things in the past 10 years about the curves and things of violence, and we can talk to the people that are the grandmothers, aunts, and mothers and fathers of people to really get true services that's going to benefit them. A lot of times I feel like one of the biggest issues we have is that we always hear this line of being resource rich, but the access hole is smaller than a pinhole. And I believe we definitely need more access to true programming that actually helps the problem. And we got to stop conducting our ways in the things that we're trying to mitigate is in a gang culture. Because you're from a different program or you're from a different place, man, that needs to end and be eradicated. And we got to be at a point where we can start working together on cohesiveness without the color, without the barriers, and say, hey, what's going to work best in our community? And that does take a role from the people in the community. I've been doing this work 20 years, October 10th this year coming up. And I've been dealing with young folks every single day, and I've done talk to a lot of people in this room that I see that don't get viewed, like People's Academy, which is a great thing, and a great program that should definitely be viewed and looked at. There's been conversations I had with elected officials and people that are in position about shootings that did not need to happen to these groups. If people stood up and listened to those comments and words from somebody on the ground level, I actually asked for everyone in this room to have a ground level respect for the people that are the firefighters without the hoses or the cops without the guns and the badges. No vests every day. Also, really, we need to get to the people that are at a pre-violent stage of where they're at right now. They're in middle schools being recruited by these gangs or want to be recruited, and we don't have no petitions on social circuits to counteract that at all. You got truth.com about cancer, but we don't have no truth.com about the violence going into our schools. One of the other things I think we do need is that these sources that everybody's talking about, street workers programs and other organizations out there, give them the resources and the things they need to mitigate this problem. And a lot of it deals with housing crisis in area and getting them out and taking trips and letting them see and explore the world. So we definitely need to view and see these things in a different light, especially when it comes to our community and people in it. It does not get viewed. I think when we look at numbers can get played with all the time. But I can talk about people's actions because what I see every day, it's appalling to me. That we need to stand, not just as a community, we got to hold the people in elected positions held accountable for their positions and roles. And if we don't like something as a democracy, let's use our voice and rise and stand.
Thank you, Adrian. I was yelling yes, yes, and yes, so clearly I was distracted. I will start with Councilor Jackson with questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I guess the one thing I did want to ask, and this might even be for folks from the administration. So the street worker program has how many current people? And after June 30th, and I know that there was a group of individuals who came from the Boston Foundation. I'm told that there will be a decrease in the actual numbers of individuals doing that. I will also note that what is troubling to me about the street worker program is that individuals are required to use their own personal vehicles. There's not a programming budget for that organization. In addition, the pay is not great and commensurate with the job that is being done. So can there be some clarification around the number of street workers that currently are in place and the plan either to continue with them or to decrease the number of street workers?
I think Sean might have, that mic should be on.
Yeah.
So to the extent you can't answer certain questions, Sean Webb might have had to go. So we can make sure to also get that to you, Councilor Jackson.
Sure. So I'll do the best I can to answer that. So you are aware, Councilor Jackson, when Mayor Walsh came into office, Street Safe was scheduled to expire in its entirety. The mayor went to the Boston Foundation and got a commitment from the Boston Foundation of $3.1 million to extend that program and double the size, frankly, of the street worker program. Right now, I believe the number of boots on the ground street workers, Adrian might be able to correct me on this, having been a prior street worker, but I believe there are 45 street workers, boots on the ground right now. You are correct in that the funding from the Boston Foundation, that $3.1 million that the mayor secured is scheduled to expire, and the mayor is pursuing other options to extend funding to keep that enhanced street worker program in place. You are also correct that we are continuing to desperately seek additional programming access for the street worker program. And from the past panel, and I know you know this firsthand, it's really about the sharing of resources that are out there. Many of the people on this panel, Monica, Rufus, and Adrian, just spoke to some of the funding that goes into other programs. You'll see in the document that you've been provided how those agencies interface with each other.
And the last question I would have is for Monica. I know that you've done a great deal of work with town halls as well as aggregating information and bringing people to get together around these issues. And I do want to note that there are people who are coming from the community together to actually deal with these issues. Can you speak about any gaps that you see and also the programming that you are rolling out to address some of these issues?
So one of the things that I want to say is that Violence in Boston is a movement. I'm not a nonprofit. I don't want nonprofit money, and I don't want any state funding just because I want to be able to say what I want when I want, first and foremost. The second thing I want to say is that Violence in Boston is a movement, and it's not to recreate programs that are happening. It's to connect people to things that actually work in our community, right? So when you log onto my website, you can click and get a mass health application. You can get a food stamp application. education. We just kicked off our Backpack 68 program because from the time a young person has lunch on a Friday to the time they go back to school on Monday is 68 hours. 3,000 kids in BPS are homeless in shelters and living in poverty. So what we plan to do is give them a backpack with 68 hours worth of food until they come back to school on Monday to make sure that they're not starving through the weekend, because that's our reality. Another thing that we're doing is a street team. We're not going out here playing the police. We're going out offering people housing, offering them housing specifically for those who have quarries but don't have children and can't live in federal housing. Going out offering them mass health. I've sat in cars with bullet holes and did mass health applications, food stamp applications, fuel assistance, National Grid arrearage help, Eversource help. You know, the things that we need to be able to survive in this community when the median income is $28,000. As far as the gaps, all of this is a direct result of poverty. Our issue is economical. One thing I learned in politics is that when somebody supports you, they donate to your campaign, right? And that's how they show you they support you. But when you care about a community, you actually fund it. That's not happening for Roxbury and parts of Dorchester.
Councilor Sabi George.
Thank you. Thank you. 4,000 BPS students experiencing homelessness. If you could just, each of you share with me some of the programs that you think are working the best, that represent sort of the best work and the best, the highest level of productivity. What are they? Because I think one of the things that we sometimes fail to do is find those best practices wherever they exist and then look to replicate.
And you're talking about best programs for what population? Are you talking about the population?
To fill these gaps. I mean, there are some programs that work, and there are some that don't. From your perspective, what are the programs that are doing that are most effective at what they do?
Okay, one program and organization I think is doing a great job for the population they serve is the Roxbury YMCA. They do extended Friday nights for teens. They provide free summer memberships, or they provide free year-round membership for teens who are a part of some of their programming. They provide extended hours for kids to come and use the facilities to play basketball, swim, work out. They feed them, things like that. Like, that is a good program because it's filling the gap that the city isn't filling. If you're a 16 and it's Friday night, what do you do? On a Saturday, what do you do? If you're a teenager in Boston, or if you live in Roxbury and you're a teenager, there's literally nothing for you to do. The jobs you had that were there when I was a kid aren't there anymore. There's no mall jobs, no downtown jobs anymore. So you literally have no out-of-school time. I mean, and I think that's a gap that the city has to address, that unfortunately places like the YMCA are trying to invest, but they need
I think
some
the
more
Y
support.
also does transportation.
They
home.
don't do transportation anymore. It's literally goes down to, okay, I can fit 3 kids in my car. There's no set. Oh, we have vans specifically designed to fill this void. So I think that's a program that is doing the job that they set out to do, but they need more support from other agencies and other people outside of what they're getting. So if you have teenagers, you live in Roxbury, you don't even got to live in Roxbury, I would suggest you send them down to the Y. Shout out to the YMCA.
And I think that all the greater Boston area-wise, if they're part of that greater Boston cohort, do free membership for teens.
I would add, so in my district, we have the Dorchester Y, so they do free membership, but they also do free membership for young people in DYS or DYS affiliated, because we handled an issue where some of those youth weren't getting their memberships, but they're entitled to free membership as well. And the Dorchester Y, I have to give a shout out to them because they honor that, and every Y is supposed to. So thank you for that. Sorry.
So I would say this. It depends on the population of young people that you're talking about. If we're talking about the young people that will actually walk into the Y and the Boys and Girls Club, then they're excellent programs, absolutely, hands down, no complaint from me. But unless you're willing to deal with the population of young people that are smoking weed, drinking Hennessy, and walking on the block and talking to them and offering those traumatized young people services, then there isn't a program that is catered to that population of people, because everything that has been stated tonight is contingent upon somebody taking initiative, right? And we have to show up for young people that are not going to show up for themselves. Somebody has to take the lead.
So who's doing it best, meeting people
So
where they're
they're-
at?
one of
Where
the-
they're at, then.
So one of the organizations that's doing it is Sean Brown, Diamond Educators, right? He gets you from the gutter, gang involved, Corey, weed, Hennessy, the whole 9 yards, and gets you to the point where you can able to wear a suit, know what it is to have employable skills, walk into the State House and hold a conversation. Although many people have issues with this program, ROCA is another program that actually has great resources to get young people to a certain point. Are they the end-all tell-all programs? No, because once again, there is not a program that caters to those young people to meet them where they are. Even the programs with the City of Boston, excellent programs, Operation Exit and NECAC and all of these programs, that's what we listen to all night. They're excellent programs. That's not the issue. The issue is that there's a group of young people that don't go to programs for safety reasons because they can't navigate through community safely, that are not going to walk into a community center because they just don't feel comfortable doing so. And unless somebody is willing to come out of their cushiony seat and walk on the block, we're never going to reach those young people.
So so you'd recommend Sean Brown's program?
Absolutely. I recommend Diamond Educators as somebody I respect and that has done work in this community. I recommend any program, 10 Point. I recommend any of the City of Boston programs, but again, it goes back to what population of young people are we working with? Because if we're working with the population of young people that's going to show up to 10 Point Coalition, that's a different population than what I'm discussing. The population of young people I'm talking about, I sit in the car while his car had just got shot up 24 hours later, and we did a mass health application because he can't get on the MBTA. He can't walk to the community center. So unless we're going to have those conversations, a lot of these disparities are not new, is my point. So it's not that we're losing out on programs, right? We don't need more money to be creating new programs. What we need is to cater to those that we keep neglecting and ignoring.
No, and I think that's very helpful, because that's the root of the problem, is not necessarily recreating the wheel. Identify the programs that are reaching people where they're at, so whether it's at the club or it's on the street, that we continue to do that work and support that work.
Absolutely, but those are 2 programs. This is a citywide issue, so I just want to be clear and say that.
But then we replicate those programs that work.
Right, so if those work, I agree with the replication, but it takes a wraparound services. Another thing that I want to say before I let you go, Rufus, is this. It's not just jobs. I'm tired of hearing people say, let's throw jobs at young people. Yes, employment is an issue. There's a social piece to this. When you're in a household and you're one of 5 children and your mother works 2 jobs and she's struggling to make ends meet, and there are other children in that house and there's mattresses on the floor, and you're pulling your clothes out of the laundry basket before you go to school, and you have to navigate through 5 communities before you get there, there's a social piece that we have to take into account when dealing with these population of young people. So it's not just helping the young person, it's actually going to the home and figuring out what's happening there to be able to address the issue and get the parent some support for buy-in, because that's how you're able to make change. You can't just address the young person and create another program or replicate a program. It has to be their wraparound services, which is part of the things that we're working on. Going to talk to parents and saying, hey, what is it that you need? How can we help you so that we can help this young person so that we don't all be back here or you're not burying your child? Sorry.
No problem. And I just want just a point of clarity that 10 Point, we deal with proven risk kids. I want to make that evident that myself, Frank Farrell, that's the population that we deal with. The kids who are wearing the hats, the kids who are responsible for driving the violence, that's the population we deal with. And again, dealing with that population, it's difficult to measure success because you have to define what success means. Some programs define success means that kid doesn't go back to jail, or that kid doesn't get shot. We look at it as we walk you from where you're at, and we set a goal for you. So we, unfortunately, one of the issues with nonprofits is we never did a good job at quantifying our numbers, data, who's coming in, who's coming out, what benchmarks are they meeting. So we had to do a better job at doing that to make sure that we're keeping track of that. So I'm gonna make sure I stay after. If anybody has any questions in particular about what 10 Point does or what areas we're in, I'll be there to answer them. But just to want to clarify that we deal with the guys who are driving the violence, and we've been doing that since 1992, and I've been doing that since 2005 personally. So just want to point that out.
As far as any programs that's working, I feel like we have, like we always say this slogan, that we're resource rich. I feel like we need to empower those programs that actually can prove a report card for a measure of success. I still think we're still so behind the ball that we need to really talk about real issues and real scenarios and solutions. There's a lot of people in this room that have ideas and concepts, but been eradicated due to the people that are in position not to view it. Get past nepotism, getting past the friendship, get past favoritism and ego, which I believe is eliminating God out. And one of the realities of it is that you got people like People's Academy that never got their respect and due, that could really help out. Like, why are we giving certifications to guys and not giving them an out? All these programs, my issue is, where's the out for them? And it has to be an intrinsic out for them, where it's not like a prescription to your doctor every day that you got to take to get better. We got to give them strong skill sets that can move them in their life. So holistically, we can change the narrative.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I want to thank you guys for, first of all, being patient. Obviously, some things ran over. I want to thank you for your words tonight. This is obviously not the beginning. You know, a lot of us take notes, and we take that to bring it back to inform the work. So whether it's about creating certain programming for a particular type of youth, more funding for existing programming, accountability, obviously, not only for electeds, but those in government, and how we get community involved and make sure they're at the table. Family support. It's not just about the young person, it's about the family. And how do we work with families? How do we partner together? Skill set. At the end of the day, I always say young people have to be able to read and write. The difference between me and some of my friends growing up in the city of Boston is the type of schools I went to. And obviously that led, like you were saying, Rufus, to certain type of universities and schools. So it's not just academics, though, but it's also skills and opportunity. And it's most important, folks who believe in our young people. At the end of the day, we got a lot of young people walking around the streets in the city of Boston who have no sense of hope about their future, who don't think they can attain their dreams, none of that. So how do we each play a role in that? And we each can play a role in that. So this was very insightful. The beginning of many conversations. Thank you guys for being here. I'm going to now transition into the public testimony to go to those folks. Thank you. Who signed up. And so, Kilra. So I'm going to call a few people, and I would say if you could leave your testimony to about 3 minutes or so, that would be helpful. And this is just, frankly, an opportunity for us to hear from people in the community, not for us to go back and forth, but us to listen to you, take your notes, and to also take that back. So I'm going to call folks in the order in which they signed up. Kilra, you'll be first. And then I want to call up Laura Jarvin, James Hill, Renee, it looks like Renee Rose, and then Liam Taylor. And if folks could just line up in that order. I know some folks probably had to leave, but if you could line up in that order, and then I'll call some more names as we keep going. Thank you. Good, Kilra, and thank you.
First of all, I want
should
to
have been up there.
apologize because when you started asking the questions, I really felt like I should have been on the panel. But because I came as the community, I wanted to testify in the community. And the reason why I decided to be a part of Violence in Boston and be on the committee is because in 2015, I had 4 events happen in my life. On July 2nd, 2015, my oldest son, Raheem Ramirez, was murdered. He was a part of the exit program. I never met Freddie, but I remember him calling, saying, Freddie's gonna kick me out the program. So when he was up there talking, I thought about Freddie. My son was a gang member, and I want to say that he had a street worker. When you talk about programs that work, when my son was murdered, I went to BMC. They had wonderful people there. Donald was there and Rusty. They met me at BMC. Without them, I don't know how I would have made it. So I will say the program at BMC works when you have people that reflect you dealing with you. So Rusty and Donald were the best. The day after my son was murdered, his street worker, Big Time, was there that day. And the guy who comes out, Courtney was there, and I felt bad for him because Courtney, so they came to my house to talk to me about my son passing, and immediately everybody's beeper went off. There was another murder, so everybody left me. And to be honest, from that day, no, I would call them to say, well, what's going on, what's going on? Nobody ever checked back in with me. And Dan Mulhern was wonderful. He actually stepped outside of his office, came to my house, and gave a financial donation, which was not in his job description. So I want to thank him. And on August 28th, my son-in-law was murdered on Creston Street. And that was my daughter's high school sweetheart. They have 2 children together. And in her situation, the detectives never talked to her. They went to his parents' house and told his parents that somebody that my daughter used to date on Humboldt, where she lives, was responsible for TJ's murder. My daughter still lives there. The detectives know who did it. They say she knows who did it. And people on Humboldt treat her some kind of way because they don't know if she knows. So her life is at risk. I've been at bat with Sean Webb and his staff because they've promised me so many times and her that they were going to relocate her because her life is at risk, and they never did. The third event is my middle son. His name is DeVray Burns. Sean Brown is his coach. My son plays for MABC. And they were coming from a game at UMass, and their car was shot up on Humboldt, where not on Walnut Park, where the head is. Now, Sean Brown's son was driving. His other son was in the car. My son was in the car, and 2 other players. His son's calling the police. Somebody just shot our car up. The police are like, pull over. But everybody in the car is like, don't pull over here. They're right where it happened. So they drove to Franklin Park, and they pulled over. The police came, made them get out the car, lay on the ground, asking them where they're from. They're like, hello. He's like, my father's the coach we have on basketball. We just came from UMass. They were on the ground until Sean showed up, who's a mentor in the community, and was like, this is my son, this is the team. My son had just lost his brother-in-law, and he just got shot at, and he's laying on the ground, and the police weren't believing that they were victims. And then the last event was on New Year's Eve. My daughter was in a car with a couple of her friends. They were picking up people to go to this hotel party. They're on Fairmont Street. Some dudes are out there hollering at them, hey, can we talk to you? They're like, no, we're going to a party. The dudes pull out guns. They start shooting at the car. The driver of the car gets shot 3 times. My daughter got grazed by the bullet. They're speeding down Fairmont Street, drive to Carmen Square, calling the police. The police are like, well, where are you at? We're just driving. Pull over. So they're driving. She ends up seeing an ambulance and crashed into the ambulance in Carmen Square. They brought the driver to the to the hospital. They brought my daughter and another person who was in the car to a police station. My daughter got grazed by the bullet. They brought her to the police station and was questioning her for 7 hours. Then they let her walk out of the police station. So when he talks about somebody getting shot or a car being shot up and they provide services, my daughter suffers from dramatic PTSD because every time there was an event with the police, they always treated her as not the victim, but the person who gets shot and then brought to the police station. So in every area that they talked about and every question that you asked, I have witnessed and lived through those events. So I'm sorry I didn't get on the panel. I'm sorry I took more than 3 minutes. But a lot of the programs work, but like you said, there's no funding. And if you don't have people from real life on those panels or when they ask the street workers, so what are you guys doing in the street? Well, where's the moms that you said you helped? Because they can say they do stuff all day long. But if you don't ask us, then you'll never know. So I just pray that mothers and family members will get involved so that our voices can really say what the city's really doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol. I'm now going to have Laura Jarvin. Laura Jarvin, T. Michael, we have a long list. I'll get you at the, I want to be respectful of everyone who signed up and in the order in which they came. So Laura Jarvin, I got James Hill, I got Renee Rose, and then I got Liam Taylor. Laura Jarvin? Okay.
Get a pillow because you'll be here for a while. Thank you. I'm T. Michael Thomas, president and founder of the People's Academy. You know who I am. The people don't know who I am. The People's Academy is a training component that working with kids in the building trades has a manufacturing piece. I work out of my house the last 10 years. I sacrifice an apartment that I can make $1,800 a month, funding folks in our community, creating jobs out of pocket, just on the rent alone. But I've witnessed the city council has advocated to get funding for the CDCs to put up more building, gentrifying us, claiming they're creating jobs, right? There is every construction build-out in Boston, there's linkage money. South Bay alone, at least $2 million. Look at all the development. And there are money allocated for training and job creation. But recently, on the 7th of March, I drove by on Blue Hill Ave, delegates and donuts. And here is one of the CDCs having this Dunkin' Donuts or whatever to get the city council and the elected officials to get them more money, over $100 million to put up more buildings so they can collect the rent. We're creating affordable housing. Well, the affordable part, the taxpayers are still paying. My point is, the People's Academy, imagine you're teaching a person a trade. Billions of dollars in construction build-out. What better thing than to provide them with a service? Not every kid is geared towards college. Why not teach them a trade? Making over $35, $45 an hour. Isn't that practical? So tell me, on this panel, who here disagrees that the People's Academy is a part solution? Who here on this panel don't think, with all that linkage money, that the People's Academy, they should be fighting and pushing for the People's Academy to build a training component and implement the manufacturing to get these boys and girls, men and women, from going in and out of jail, that it's dropping out of high school with nothing to do with turning to the streets to create an income? Why not teach them a trade? Remember what the previous governor said. The key to the middle class is what? Through construction. You tell me, in one person in this room, what is wrong with teaching a kid a trade? Does anyone in this room object to that? So shouldn't they now allocate for the People's Academy to get more funding instead of me keep reaching in my pocket and funding a program that's benefiting the people that elects you into office? Thank you.
Laura Jarvin.
Hi, I'm going to try to make this quick because I know we got to get going.
No, thank you, Laura. Thanks for being.
But so what I do is youth employment, but at the same time I have, over the past 2 years, started working much closer with the high schools. And one thing I really do want to share is I'm finding that a lot of these students really genuinely can't focus on their schoolwork based on all the trauma they faced. But even that alone, it's the relationships between the teachers, between the headmasters, between the policies. And then when you have these schools, then you have these kids that aren't excelling in classes, but they're not even receiving the funding to play sports or to do the art programs that they want to do. They literally have they literally barely have anything that can make them happy, almost, to distract them. And the ones that may do attend the YMCA or get opportunities with ABCD, they went through a lot to even get there, and to even be able to sustain it. So I just feel like we're at a point where even just in the school building, we're missing the relationship with the parent. Just alone today, I learned that one of my students who was asking for a job over and over and over, robbed a bank. And then what left was the parent, and who was completely lost. And none of the teachers reached out. None of the school reached out. And also, just even today, 2 students arrested at school. Granted, they were disrespecting the police officers, and it was obscene. They should have not have been doing it, and the police officers gave them several chances. But at the same time, again, where were we as school, as educators, there to actually reach out to the parents like, hey, I know this just happened to your child, but how can we offer you services now to know like that we're still actually truly connected as a community? I just feel like there's such a loss of effective communication and showing still support, of almost just saying like, we're not here to judge, but we're still here to support in other ways. So what I'm almost kind of saying is, even just starting in the schools, there needs to almost be a restructure of relationships with the teachers and the faculties and the headmasters. I think everyone tries their best, but when there's not even enough programming happening, and you know it's so difficult for them to focus, even just a listening ear, I just feel like isn't present. And I just honestly feel like there's just a wall just being built further and further when it comes to the youth. So I would just love to see a little bit more programming offered, volunteer work, and just some more support reaching out to parents in general as an expectation of the schools almost. Okay.
Thank you, Laura. James, and then after James, I have Renee Rose. Go ahead, James. Thank you.
Proceed. James Hills, for the record, resident of Mattapan, Mattapan here in Boston. So I'm not going to reiterate a lot of what's been said tonight. There's been some great stuff. We can't continue in a cycle. Ayana's had hearings. You've had hearings. There have been town hall meetings. And we do the same old stuff. We come, we testify, we talk, and nothing really happens. And this is no slight to you, because I know you're, this is no slight to you. I know you're just getting into position, but if you could, in the taking the notes, all of you, Councilor Jackson as well, we have to go radical. Someone referred to the positions, the right people being in the positions. Those that are on the ground, we need to stop recycling the higher ups, people from, you know, that have been around for years, that are burnt out, that have demonstrated that it's become a check to them, and the passion and the real concern that is needed to really do the work, from street worker all the way up to the head of HHS. Where is he? We ain't seen him in the community. I'll leave that alone. So we need people in positions, not only that have the degree, and not only held a sign, and not only have the hookup, but we need people that have on-the-ground experience. Bum in them, on one hand, you need to get him off the street because he's going to burn out. On the other hand, he has some intel that a lot of those workers on the street have intel that sometimes when it gets passed up or suggestions are made somewhere in that mid-level management, something's not happening. So in the notes and in taking back and recommendations, recommend that from BCYF, the Health Commission, and whatnot, there needs to be some reshuffling of some folks and some policies. There are gaps. There are huge gaps. You're aware, so I won't repeat, of phone calls that are made in high-profile cases where you think city agencies would be on it, and they're not. They're coming from the community trying to make the, there's folks here that I've had to call and make the connection because somebody dropped the ball. So as somebody said earlier, one thing's being presented here and it's all hunky-dory and in a report and whatnot, but there's still a problem. So my thing is, do please, Councilor Campbell and Jackson, and I say this respectfully.
And it's Abby George.
I'm talking to the convener and the head of public safety.
But I only say that because we all signed on. So
okay, that's wonderful. Please, don't let this be business as usual. Monica referred to the fact that people are rising up. The reality is funding, positions people are hired for. We're not asking for a handout. We're asking, generally, asking folks to do their job. Now, we're going to go and do what we need to do in the community, but at the end of the day, there's funding out there, and we got to come. I have a hashtag. We do better together, and I'll just leave that at that. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Renee?
Good evening, everyone. So I'm going to try to be as brief as possible. First of all, I'd like to thank the panel. Some of the panel members are gone. I'm not sure if the media is here, and that's fine.
This is recorded, though.
Oh,
and
that's
this is being
great. That's
broadcast.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Tito, I know personally from volunteering on his annual turkey event, and Dan Mulhern, I know from Tina Cherry's Peace Institute. So I'm a survivor. I'm a City of Boston resident. I am a voter, a taxpayer. Some of the statistics that I seen that were put up there are recent. In 2005, none of these programs or any of the opportunities were available. I lost my son during that time. There were 75 homicides. He was number 60. At that time, there was no clergy available. Maybe they were around, maybe there was another incident that week, I'm not sure. I had my family as well as God. I didn't hear not one person mention God in here tonight, but I am.
Yep.
Okay. Also, the support of my job. I work for the Middlesex County Juvenile Court. They were there to support me. I've been there for 19 years. I volunteer in the community. I'm here because I heard about that child. That struck a chord with me. Every time I hear of an incident, I'm re-traumatized. People think, okay, it happened 10 years ago, it happened 12 years ago, it's over. No, it's not. It lives with you. You feel it. Everybody's affected by it. The amount of people that I had come to a funeral, I haven't seen that amount of people come to a community meeting. That's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. I want Boston to do better. We have educational opportunities. People from all over the world come here to get an education, and it's disheartening to see such chaos and turmoil in the communities that I grew up in. I grew up in Mattapan, but I'm still a Boston resident. I visit my family members in Roxbury, Dorchester. I do what I can. As a survivor, I still have to work. I still have a child to take care of he's a man now, he was 8 at the time. And during that time, I had to get a phone call, take my 8-year-old with me to the hospital to identify my son, who at the time was 25, who was murdered, who was an unsolved murder, actually, because it's not solved yet. So I have to live with that. So that's one of the issues of people being re-traumatized, because there are thousands, literally thousands of cases that are unsolved. And this is not to criticize the police department, because I have family members who were police officers. One of the cadets was sitting on the panel. I don't have to mention the name, because he's been an integral part of our family as well. So I've had a lot of good support services, but I'm so sick and tired of the same old story over and over again. I'm a part of Boston, and just like everybody else, all the other neighborhoods, whether we're Black, Asian, Spanish, this is supposed to be a melting pot, but as far as I'm concerned, it is a war zone. How come a 5-, 6-year-old child is probably on their way home to go to bed or get ready for school, never mind that it's 9:30. I don't even want to hear about that. The fact is that he's trying to get to his house safely, and he's being shot at. Where the hell are these guns coming from? Who's bringing these guns into the community? They're not registered. Clearly, they're not licensed gun owners. Why do we have to deal with this violence on this level? It is too much. It's just a re-traumatization over and over again. And I'm glad that families have these new programs, but we shouldn't have newer programs. A lot of this stuff should have been cut off at the head. There shouldn't be so much violence going on in this city. What are we not doing? So I'm here to be a part of the solution, and I'm still working, and I'm still volunteering, but I still hear about situations like that 5-year-old baby. That is absurd, and it wouldn't happen in another neighborhood. Why is it happening in Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan? This is terrible, and I'm thoroughly disgusted by it. Thank you.
No, thank you, and thank you for sticking around to testify. I really appreciate it. Liam Taylor. Let's see. I have Grace. So last call for Liam. I think it says Liam Taylor. I have Grace. Grace, I can't read the last name. Thank you. E.G. Wally. Did I say that correctly? And then I have Soledad Boyd, Shagun, and then Elise. Say again.
Am I next?
Yes, you are. Thank you. I would have called you sooner, but the other person didn't show up.
That's all right.
Can you state your name for the record, Grace?
My name is
Thank
Grace, the Conqueror, Ijiwali. Greetings, everyone.
Thank you.
My testimony is in a form of questions. Here we go. Public safety and trust building. If you are aware of the historical impact of why certain communities, specifically ones of color, lack trust of police, and for good reason, and you desire their cooperation at the cost of risking it all, why is there little to no funding for safety measures if they're valuable but not valued? Clarence, what are you most concerned about accomplishing? 1, solving and clearing cases, or 2, breaking barriers that ground the violence in the first place? Reduction of crime and its validity. The information presented seemed flawed because of the lack of incorporating possible unreported and or failed to be documented reports. Has crime really decreased, or are you filling in the blanks of your failures? Relationships and trust building. There was a strong stressing of working together as a needed variable to the equation, yet there was no mention of an effective plan to make this happen, even though the reasons for why, which were valid but passed off as a complaint. Have you considered these valid reasons significant via empathy or sympathy? And how do you plan on implementing a plan utilizing and reassuring the safety of these concerns? Street workers, with no funding for providing safety, yet their work has severely and significantly impacted the reduction of retaliation, crimes. How would funding effectively increase and impact their work? The African-American officer in blue, I believe he was the chief, but I did not catch his name. And he stated that they're bigger and better. Question, if you're bigger and better, why are you still successfully ineffective in clearance, but unsuccessful in effectively not closing violent crimes? Are the upholders of the system willing to risk their lives, get comfortable with getting uncomfortable, and utilize the funding that supports their lifestyle to fix these problems? The church and the state. How is there a separation between the two when they both prey on people of color? What is the difference between the system of a drug dealer, the system of a church, and the system of the state when everyone has a governance and a block? Impact and reconstruction. How about considering community service as a reward for individuals to the community and not as a reward from the individual to the state? Accessibility to moving up versus staying complacent. Have we thought about widening the racial wealth gap? Economic racial demographic transition, and that's looking at the death and the birth rate. And we know that it's very, very low when it comes to people of color. It's about a zero. We just put it at that. Question, is the threat of the decrease of Caucasians being majority the cause of increased violence, abortion, poverty, crime, and incarceration to remain in control? It seems as though politics, policies, laws, governance are eggshell weak and feather soft. Are we hiding behind the term protection when we should really be saying exploitation? Crime policing and the good, bad for benefits. Now generating revenue. Looking at it as a cash register, is the justice system blind, or is it an intentional hustler of the system? And how would the Commonwealth make money if there weren't any problems that can be multiplied, expanded, and intentionally breastfed based off dependency? Court fees, the debt and the consequences of not paying them, and the relation to violence and the effects on family, which are the ones who are financially supportive and at stake. Where does most of the money come from for the budget, from municipal, and how does it affect people of color? Laws, policy, and governance. Who and what are current laws, policies protecting, and how has it been used as an excuse not to change? Final, last question here, talking about the cycles that lead to violence. Now, it has been mentioned before by Mr. Hill, but this is in question format. Is this meeting another platform for community members and soldiers for the end of violence in its many forms, going to state the facts and concerns to be fixed, but to be washed over the ears with no concern except for cashing in? Thank you very much. I am Grace the Conqueror.
Grace, thank you. Soledad?
Hey, my name is Soledad Boyd, and I live in Grove Hall. And so there are a couple of things that I wanted to mention. I think that, and as you see the audience leaving, I think what continues to be a concern for folks, or an issue with folks, is at hearings that we get such limited time, and we wait for panel after panel after panel. And I'm not sure if folks agree with me. I'm not actually concerned about the rate being up 4%, down 4%, because I will say, so it was mentioned that in 2016, there were 13 acts of gun violence coming out of B2. 5 of those happened in my neighborhood, right across the street from me. So the counselor mentioned Nazing Street, and I think that my big concern is that this, all of the data is about some petty beef between the mayor and the counselors and all of that, and it's not, and that's what's been written up in the press, that like, oh, this person is this person's information correct? So, the police talked a lot about the lack of cooperation. So I want to tell the council how I and my community have cooperated and continue to cooperate. The first incident of gun violence that happened last year in the Nazing Street area was gunshots fired, no one hit. We said then, this is going to start summer off in a bad way. The second incident was a young man being robbed and stabbed. The third incident that happened on Nazing Street was a young man playing what we were told by the police, Russian roulette, and he shot himself in the head. The second incident was a young man walking up Nasing Street, or this is going on the 4th Street, walking up Nasing Street, and someone shooting him in the head. And that was the night that the counselor was out there, and I was out there as well, from 11 o'clock to 1:30 in the morning. What the counselor didn't mention in talking to the young people, and there was one young man who was extremely upset. It was obvious. There were no trauma folks on site. He was getting paranoid of people walking by, of cars driving by. The counselor had the police stop a car that circled the street 5 times, if you recall, Counselor Jackson. The unfortunate thing is, about a month later, that young man was arrested and charged with another shooting that happened on a weekend morning at 10 o'clock, and someone walking up and shooting someone in the head. And that young man, who we all failed because his trauma was there. His trauma was there on that street. He was upset, he was scared, he was angry. And now that young man will spend more of his life, if he's convicted, in prison than he has been on this earth. That's a problem. Right. And what have we, and each time we went and we spoke to our city councilors, our state reps, personally went down and spoke with the captain of B2, spoke with Detective Paul Quinn, and it was one problem property. The house, neighbors put it on the problem property list. To this day, we still have not heard whether, come summer, is that house going to be active? The house is in foreclosure. No one has gone to the bank and said, take care of your property. And that's a law in the city. So this, to say, it hurt me to hear the police say, oh, we're not blaming you, but nobody cooperates. And that's all we have been doing. I have lived at Nasing Court since 2001. And April 1st, 2001, and myself and my neighbors have continued to cooperate, have continued to ask for support. We hold events in the courtyard. We, last summer, every other Friday was Kids' Day in the courtyard, where we just brought toys out. We're putting people out on the streets so that they can see things. So to say that, this narrative has to be rewritten. Because if you continue to say to the community, you're not cooperating, then people are going to say, well, there must be a reason why nobody's cooperating, so I'm not putting myself out there and cooperating. So let's start telling the story of community folks who do cooperate.
Right.
Let's start, and one other thing I wanted to mention, when we're talking about coming up with solutions, look, what is the problem properties for if the problem is never solved? What are those meetings for if the problem isn't solved? So that has to happen. The house where a number of young people were living, they weren't living in a house that had no water, no plumbing by choice. They had nowhere else to go. Not the young man who shot himself with Russian roulette, nowhere to go. Not a young man that I worked with from the time he was 16 years old and lived at Wayne and Maple, and was abandoned by his mother, was abandoned by his father, went into foster care, aged out, and was now over the summer at 28, homeless and living in a house and asking me if he could come to my house to shower. That was not choice. Young people are not out here on a 20-degree night standing in front of the grocery store, the convenience store right up on Warren Street, because they want to be there. They don't, the days of needing to stand on the corner and sell drugs are over. That's what we have cell phones for. You don't need to do that. So this issue is about housing. This issue is about abandoned neighborhoods. This issue is about resources. I will say the street workers were there that night. And the good thing about them being there was that no one knew anything about this young man's family. And when the street workers came over, it was the young people who were able to tell them where this young man's family was, and then go to that family and say, your child is in the hospital. We don't want him to die alone. I mean, I don't care about data. I don't care about who's running for mayor, who's not running for mayor. I don't care about beefs. This happened, this incident, this house, where a number of these incidents happened, there's a clergy member who can stand in his backyard and watch it. And watch everything. He can stand in his backyard and watch this. And I have not once seen him out there during any of this. So when you start thinking about where to give money, and people mentioned a lot of great places, things that I have never even heard of, and I love that they exist. Stop giving money to the clergy and give it to the people who are doing the work. Every year, we have the same thing, where the clergy comes out and says, hey, you know, we need all this money, or this isn't happening, that's not happening, and they can march up and down Blue Hill Avenue till the cows come home. It's not going to make a difference. There are people who have much more knowledge than I do. They were on your panel, and it's good that you invited them there. Let them do the work, help them do the work. We asked, and I'm going to close with this, we asked for a trauma team to come out to support the community after these ongoing acts of violence. What we got 2 days, 3 days after were flyers in our hallways, flyers. No trauma team came out. And this happened like at the end of fall. It wasn't until James Hills came to an event that we had at Christmas time and spoke to people about the incident that happened. No, flyers. That's what we got, flyers. Is that what we're worth? I mean, is that our only value? Is just some flyers tossed around the hallway? That, you know, so I don't care, 4%, 5%, if 4 of them happened in my neighborhood, actually what ended up being 5 happened in my neighborhood alone, then tell me that's a statistic that's up, because the year before there weren't that many. Thank you.
Soledad, first of all, thank you very much. I think it's important. There are still folks here from the Health Commission, and they've stuck around. I think you should speak with them, frankly. They're here. They're waving their hands. Obviously, it's about accountability. So I'm only saying that because they're here waving their hands. I would hope that you would talk to them about what you and your community have felt was a very inaccurate response given what you guys were dealing with. Thank you for testifying, and thank you for being patient and sticking around. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have Shagun, if he's still here, and then I have Elise. Shagun, Elise, and then I have, it looks like Awanda. The writing isn't very clear. Is Shagun here? No. Okay, go ahead.
Hello. My name is Elise Sutherland. And first, I would
Thank you, Elise.
Thank you. I'd like to start off by saying I'm personally offended by the fact that not only did the commissioner, but, and I'm going to say it, all his little cronies that came in here with him are gone.
I will say,
Except for the men that are standing here.
Right.
I'm not speaking
Yeah.
about you all,
and I
but
want to
everybody
acknowledge
else.
them because they usually stick around all the time.
They do.
Yep, they do.
But everybody else,
I hear you.
they need to be ashamed of themselves, like other people don't have things to do. I had 2 meetings to go to tonight, and I'm here still.
Yep.
I've lived in Roxbury my entire life. I'm only 26 years old. My parents moved from Warren Gardens to Harold Street. The reason my parents moved from Warren Gardens is because my parents knew that the funding for the housing would be up within 20 years. So they wanted to take hold of the opportunity when the housing market had crashed in the 90s to make sure their children were able to possibly succeed. So they bought a house. At no point in time during my parents' search for this home did anyone give them any sort of discretion on the neighborhood in which they were moving into. The Boston police have called Hallworthy Street Hellworthy Street for Lord only knows how long. And that is the street directly behind my house. Since I was 5 years old, I cannot even count on my hands and feet how many murders, People who have been shot at, died from it, whatever you want to call it. I can't even tell you how many I have witnessed. My parents stopped me from being allowed to hang out in my own neighborhood with kids I was growing up with because they were afraid of something happening to me. So I became a window kid. I used to get made fun of in my neighborhood because I was a window kid, because I wasn't allowed to come outside. And then when I did start coming outside, one by one, the people who I knew that I would hang out with outside the house were being killed. I can't even count. Once again, I can't count how many times I have gone in the house and just barely missed gunshots. It is completely unnerving to me, wholly and completely unnerving to me that this has been allowed to go on as long as it has. One of my neighbors is a prime example. One of her sons was killed in 1993 in front of my house. She received no sort of trauma support, nothing. In 2014, another one of her sons was killed directly in front of my house. This time, and as I have learned to do, most people run away from the windows when they hear gunshots. I run to the window to see who did it, to see what happened. Because I've sat by and watched so many of my friends and neighbors die and nobody speak up for them, that I knew if there was anything I could possibly do, I was gonna do it. So I started running to the window when shots are being fired outside my house, just so I can see what kind of car, if it was a car, who it was. I'm on the 911 dispatch giving descriptions as I'm watching people run off down the street. And do the police respond in a timely manner? Half the time, no. The other times when they do, you want to talk about cooperation. You wonder why you don't get cooperation, or you wonder why you can even make the accusation that you don't get cooperation. It's because y'all don't cooperate with us. I have been told to my face by Boston police officers, "We'll get to you." When I'm a witness who's trying to give you a description of something that just happened, a crime, you're gonna tell me you'll get to me when you get to me? How dare you? What sort of relationship have you built at all, if any, in these communities that you come out and ask so much for? Just it's April, 2 months ago, at the Garrison Trotter Neighborhood Association meeting, I was there where the sergeant from B2 Police Station was talking about how they're doing recruitment right now. March 25th, just past 2 weekends ago, was the date for the police officer's exam. So I asked him directly, "Excuse me, sir, what is it that your people, your officers, on all different levels are doing for community outreach besides coming out to these meetings, which y'all clearly don't even care about? What are you doing more than just coming out to these meetings to let these young men who are out here, young women who are out here having these issues, what are you doing to let them know they could be a Boston police officer too? Are you doing anything?" I come from a family of educators and people who have served in all different kinds of forces. My grandfather was a Vietnam veteran, came back and was treated like crap. I come from a middle-class black family, I guess you could say, but I was taken out of the Boston public school system and put into the METCO program because my parents felt as if it would be a better opportunity for me, but I actually learned so much more and so in a better space. And for me, when I was in Boston public schools, because I knew my teachers cared about me. I could see it in the way they taught. I could hear it in their voices when they spoke to me. I could see it in their eyes when they looked at me, the compassion they had. But I was sent to Marblehead High School, where I experienced racism for the very first time in my life when I had a white boy walk up to me and ask me, "What's good, my nigga?" And I've lived in Boston my entire life. Up until the age of 15, I did not experience racism until I went to Marblehead. And I wondered why. And it turns out that, oh, it's because the METCO program really ain't as cracked up as it says it is, because what they're actually doing is shipping our inner city students into these suburban schools, and these suburban schools don't care to have our students there at all. And we are looked down upon. Oh, but I came in the 9th grade, so I was a Boston kid to the METCO students as well. So I was not only outcasted from the other races that I went to school with, but also from the METCO students. I was called the white girl in my neighborhood my entire life growing up. And then I was also called a snitch in my neighborhood when my neighbor, who I considered an uncle, was shot and killed outside my house. And a neighbor's nephew was also shot the same night. And I got up and spoke to the police and said, I saw what happened, and I'm going to try and do my best to make sure that nothing else like this ever happens again. And what the hell happened? I got called a snitch in my own neighborhood. And then when my father, who is supposed to defend me, goes to defend me, because the police were standing around when all of this happened. He goes to defend me. Didn't the police back up and turn their backs to let my father go handle this situation on his own, even though they were standing right there? How dare you leave from this hearing? How dare you?
Elise?
I'm done. I'm done. I'm truly done, because all of this honestly was a show.
Elise, I would like to say this. Some of us stick around to the end. Some of us listen. Some of us didn't plan for something else.
And
So I
I'm
would say
sorry,
that.
but I have to cut you off because you are the ones that always do.
Y'all
always do.
And I hear you on that.
Y'all always do, and I
hear you on that.
expect you. I literally expect you all to do that.
hear you on that.
I don't expect any less.
Yep.
And I thank you for doing that. I truly do.
Thank you.
But everybody else that left,
I hear you.
you want to act like nobody else has anything else to do with their lives?
I hear you.
You need to be ashamed of yourselves, and yes, quite frankly, y'all need to be relieved of your positions. There needs to be a turnover. Because one thing I have noticed as they got up here and said we have the best medical facilities, we have so many unsolved murders, and organ trafficking has been in the news lately. Real big. Black people are a hot commodity, our organs are. And we're being killed, and we have one of the best hospitals, some of the best hospitals in the world, and people come here to get procedures done. So it makes your mind go to so many different places when you're thinking about the actual issue that we have here. I've had Boston police tell me, because they look at my house when they come to these, when they come to the scene of a crime, and they go, oh, gee, you live in a nice big old house. I'm like, yeah, thank you. I know. And then what do they say? Oh, well, all the stuff that goes on around here, you guys could just sell it and get a pretty penny for it. And all I think about is, you'd like that, wouldn't you? A nice big old house, 17 rooms in it, that's only appraised for $500,000? But anywhere else it would be over $1 million? Why is my house only worth so little? Is it because of the violence that continues in my neighborhood? I and a majority of us black folks And I don't even like calling us black because I'm not black. This microphone is black. I'm not black. I'm a human being. I'm a female.
Yep. I'm going to say this, because I want to get to at least 3 more people. There are folks in here, whether it's with our team or some other teams, who I know would want to continue the conversation, who did stick around, some of whom are city employees who did stick around. And so many of them are still sitting here. You still got your state rep here. You still got others who did stick around. And so obviously they're here to listen and to continue to listen. But thank you for sharing, and thank you for sharing so candidly. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
I just want to say on the last note, because y'all see, I broke a sweat saying this because I have a lot of passion for these issues. And I'm so thankful that these programs have been put in place. I really am, because I've never received any sort of trauma for being a witness.
Yep. Thank you. And so I'm going to call the last names. I have Awanda, and then I have Mr. DeRosa, and then I have Carlos, and then I have Michael Kozu. Awanda? All right, Mr. DeRosa? Carlos, you'll go up after him, and then Mike. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Talking to.
Oh, you want me into the mic?
Yep, because it's being recorded and broadcast. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you for having this meeting. No disrespect to anybody, positions you hold, and so forth. But this meeting should have been heard by the citizens of Boston. To me, it just seems like people are selling their resume, which is fine. These numbers that you asked the police department and all these different programs, you guys received these numbers months ago. As you know, you approved the city budget. You go through these numbers before you approve these budgets. You know what money's being allocated and where it's going. As you can hear from the young lady that was just up here, the community's hurting. They're not coming to this because they want to hear the police talk about what they are doing and what they're not doing, what City Hall's doing, what City Hall's not doing, what programs are working, what programs are not working. I run a nonprofit in Boston. It's called the Boston Bengals. I don't ask for any charity. I give away 60 scholarships to families that need it. Yes, we need the money to run the program, but at the same time, if I can cover my overheads, those are kids that can come to a program for 3-4 months out of their year. I did 21 years in the city of Boston. I used to be a city employee till I seen the politics behind it. And I say that with a smile on my face because the politics is dead. They keep playing us like we slow, like we stupid. We, the people, need to hold us accountable. We put these people in place. We vote them in, we vote them out. Half of these folks do live in our community, but I guarantee you drive down their street, you're not going to find no trash like my mother's street on Draper. I clean the trash every Monday. Why? Trash is on Tuesday. All the trash that builds up on the corner, I clean it. Why? Because I respect my community, even though I got crackheads, drug dealers, gangbangers, and everything else down the street, because I was one of them. And what kept me from going that path wasn't because I didn't like what I was doing. It's because someone believed in me. And that person that believed in me was a part of my community. I'm not here to entertain them. I really don't get involved in too much of the politics. What I'm here to say to us people is we can't expect the police to solve crimes when we don't say nothing. In '99, me and my brother were shot at 6 times. My brother was hit twice. He's been in a wheelchair since '99. I testified. While I was being questioned by the police, they didn't ask about my safety. Are you scared of being retaliated against? That wasn't in my mind. My brother's safety was. So I testified. My street credit speaks for itself. Being a snitch, you want to call it that. No, I was a victim. And this is what we have to understand as a community. We are victims of our own selves. When you see something happen and you don't say nothing, and then weeks go by and something else happens, and then everyone wants to jump up and down and say, oh, this and that. I don't know if you remember a few years back, let's say about maybe 15 years ago, Malik Andrade got shot. He was 3 years old. My son's best friend. I've watched my son for the last 19 years ask me the same questions. When's my turn? What do you mean, when's your turn? When am I going to get shot? Everyone else seems to be getting shot. So for me as a parent of a teenager who is running the streets because his friends are running the streets, and as a parent who myself was running the streets and know what these streets are, they're not the worst streets in the world. Far from that. Some of my best friends are from a street corner. And they didn't have a choice, just like I didn't have a choice. I'm Cape Verdean. I went through an identity crisis growing up in Boston. Okay? I went to Madison Park and had to fight off the kids from Franklin Hill and Franklin Field and OP and all that. But you know what? At the same time, I got my respect. That's what these kids are looking for. So all these programs that they're offering, great, but they don't work together. We got all these chiefs who are not willing to sit down together and get rid of their title. My title is the president of the Boston Bengals. I also run another program called Football for Fun, which we only charge $20, and that covers the uniforms and the porta potty. I applied for a permit from the city, and the first thing they asked me is how many custodians you need. I said, excuse me? How many custodians you need? I said, we only need the schoolyard. We don't need the building. Well, you still got to put a permit in, and you still need a custodian. I couldn't understand why would I need a custodian, but then I realized the politics. That's $65 an hour. That's against this contract. So my point to everyone here today, let's stop looking to the police for answers. Let's stop looking for the city for answers. Get your ass up out of gear and get into gear. Because half of us are at the point of our lives where you're either going to be the victim, and I say that because a friend of mine was killed at 40 years old by two kids that I happened to coach as a youngster, which hurts to see these kids have to go down these channels because we as adults fail to realize we control their futures. We're the ones voting people in places. We're the ones that are making the phone calls. But then on the back end of it, we don't hold ourselves accountable when we see violent crimes happen because we, under this impression, snitching. I've heard 5-year-olds talk about snitching. Playing in the playground, you a snitch. Because he came and told Mr. Domingos that he pushed me, he's a 5-year-old snitch. Do you understand the concept that these kids are looking up to? If not, you need to come outside at 7 in the morning, drive down Harvard Street, come down Bowdoin, go up Geneva, and you will see these kids walking to school by themselves, 7, 8 years old. Where's the parents? They're at work. Where's the crossing guard? So how is this kid going to feel safe when there's nothing in place besides his parent and then people around him that showed him love? So coming here for me was just an eye-opening to something I already knew 25 years ago when I started burying my friends. Shit ain't changed. It's the same shovel, and they keep shoveling the same shit down our throats. So when we feel like getting up and speaking up, this is the time before you wind up being the next body or the next robbery victim or the next person to have something done to you that you did not want done to you. I've watched it. All my friends respect me because I tell them the same thing over and over. You can achieve anything you put your mind to. Forget about what people are going to call you because they're going to do that regardless. So tonight, it's 9:30. My kids get up at 6. So it's great that you guys had all these individuals who are on the payroll, on the pay clock, sit up here and speak to us. But then at the back end of it, the city, meaning the constituents, are gone. The room's empty. How many people live in this neighborhood? A show of hands. Raise your hands. So they're all gone, and everyone that has the issue, the young lady, and I'm pretty sure your face is so familiar, her venting just showed me that this meeting should have been a venting session for the community, not for the police to come tell me, yeah, we got another $100 million, and guess what we're going to do with it? $250. And overtime, my center was closed for $250,000. I worked at the John Marshall School for 17 years. I was transferred out of the neighborhood because I spoke up too much. So for me, this is more than just personal. For me, it's watching kids that I've watched since kindergarten. Just like Monica said, 68 hours of being hungry. I bought sandwiches from Ideals because it's the cheapest in town and turn around and fed kids. But at the same time, these individuals, they're gone. We got 3 brasses sitting here. Where's the rest of them? I understand they got a job to do, but at the same time, those numbers are online. I can get everything they said online. You've gotten everything they said online. These programs are all online. I'm not here to hear the same thing again about programs online. We need a session where we, the people, can come out and explain why we don't speak to the police, why we are frustrated. I can understand why you don't want to come out the house, because I got a phone call from my father because my neighbor got killed in front of my house. He wanted to know where I was at because we look alike. So we need to figure out how to remove the politics from the constituents. When it's time for us to come out and be political, we will. But right now, we need to heal as a community and as a city. And it ain't going to happen by having these kind of meetings where we're the last. We need to be the first. You guys have a good night.
Thank you. Carlos? And then Mike. And I have to say, they're going to kick us out the building. But I also want to thank the staff of ABCD for opening up their space. It's not always easy to find a space in the community to hold a hearing because of logistics. So I want to thank the staff of ABCD for sticking around and also opening up their space and setting everything up. I appreciate it.
I was going to thank you, but it's already been done. So thank you again really quickly. I want to thank Madam Chairwoman and the rest of the panel, councilors. Thank you for this time. I do get into the politics. My name is Carlos Enriquez. I'm a lifelong resident of Roxbury. But I think there's a couple of different conversations. There's a conversation that we as men and women need to have in the community. And I want to recognize the men that do it in the community that I know of, because we don't give it to each other enough. The Rufus Falks, the Frank Farrells, the Adrian Majors, the Don Osgoods, the James Hills. You know, we have our own conversation about how we work in our community and how we serve in our community and how we're accountable to each other. However, and I'm going to try not to repeat any points that were already said, there's a different level of accountability when we come before the Boston City Council, or what we all have of the Boston City Council. You are responsible for the city budget. The city budget does not pass without 7 of you voting on that budget. Now, you've heard testimony that we've all heard before, because I've heard it before, I've heard it dozens of times, as you have. And I know at some point it might become anecdotal, but it's not. It's real life stories. So it's great that the Health Commission is here, and I'm going to direct this right to the Health Commission. It's great that you're here, but every time you hear a story about no trauma response, that's not anecdotal. That's every time. Because I have a story, you've heard 3 or 4 tonight, and if we kept going around in the neighborhoods, you would continue to hear the same story. There's some street workers there, no trauma services. We all know who Courtney Gray is, and we all wish we could clone him and make more of them, but we don't allow him to make, we don't have him in a position where he can affect our community the way we'd like him to affect our community. You're responsible for overseeing systems, and I know that you guys aren't directly managing these systems. However, you do look at the budget and whether you continue to fund a line item, what the accountability is. If this were a business, it would be treated much different. We would look at best practices. If we keep throwing out a number, because numbers get thrown out a lot in politics, if we talk about 3,500 people that drive crime, and if that's a real number, if you choose to believe it, let's say it is, then you know 45 street workers ain't even scratching the surface of 3,500. So at some point, we have to be real about the resources that we put forward. Now again, the men and women of our community will do what we can do and what we need to do, and we will continue to improve to do that. However, there's money being spent, and it's not being overseen in a responsible manner. It's just being spread out. There's no measurable results. There's no tangible outcomes. Now, in the work, as the speaker described earlier, sometimes it is difficult. Sometimes a tangible result is graduating high school. Sometimes it's getting a job. There's small pieces of it. But for these programs, that we're not giving out millions and millions of dollars. We have to figure out how to be more efficient. Police are not crime prevention. They arrest people that commit crimes. Crime prevention, let me give you an example. Trauma response, everybody knows trauma. Everybody knows this community is going through it, because every time you have one of these community meetings, we're pouring it out. We need a trauma response team for every neighborhood that can make the capacity of the neighborhood. We also need them in our schools, and we've known this for years and years because it gets studied every year by politics. We sent a trauma response team to our Boston Public Schools the day after Donald Trump gets elected, but we don't send trauma response teams that can hit the capacity we need them to hit when a kid in the neighborhood gets killed or a kid at that school gets killed or a classmate. That's glaring disrespect. And I expect anybody that claims to represent me to be knowledgeable enough to know that that's disrespectful, knowledgeable enough to know that that's not meeting our interests and what we deserve, and to speak about it out loud publicly and then rectify the situation. So I do hope that you not only take notes, but take this testimony to heart. It's not new. I've heard it. You've heard it. It's time that we figure out, how much is it worth to you? How much is it worth to say, maybe all these grants shouldn't go through one fiscal conduit? Maybe we should start trusting. I think the question was asked earlier, how do we know what's a good program for youth? Ask a young person that's been through that program. That's who will tell you whether, you talked to Domingo De Rosa just spoke. You talk to him, he's a coach. You see kids text message him, this man changed my life, and this is why I rock with him. I'm sure you have a story like that. I'm sure you have a story like that. I'm sure you have a story. Ask the young people and stop asking in this circle conversation about who's going to fix it. Ask the end user. You're talking about education, ask the student. You're talking about crime prevention for youth, ask the youth. This, and I will reiterate one point, I didn't want to repeat anything, but to have this meeting, and I'm thankful you had it at this time in this location, but to have us speak last under time constraints, like Mr. DeRosa said, when all that information that was given earlier is public information, as you well know, that you can receive during 9 to 5, they will come to your office to make that pitch, you can request the information, is disrespectful to our community. And it is hard to build relationships of trust when there is disrespect in that fashion. And this is not the first time it's come up. I hope it's going to be the last time, but probably not. So I'm going to end my remarks there. Please put the resources where your commitment really is, and please measure them and make sure that they're filled with results, not just rhetoric. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, we'll wrap up with you. I have to apologize to Mickey. Mickey, we'll have to get you next time.
I will try to be.
I have to get a kid to bed, so I apologize. I'm walking up before you. I hate to do it.
No problem.
Thank you, Councilor Saab.
I'll try to be as brief as possible. This is pressure about trying to be the last one. I know people are trying to leave. I'm not going to repeat.
Mike, D4, you go ahead.
My name is Michael Kozu. I'm a project writer. I've been in this neighborhood for the last 20 years. I do want to acknowledge a lot of the points that were raised. We will try to help follow through and work with you on a number of different points, and we work with a number of people in this room. There are some things I do want to point out, and we need your help on. We've been working on a case for the past year and a half of a situation that happened very close to here. I'm not going to try to be very specific because I'm not trying to break any confidentiality. The person lives not that far from here, but it was a very serious situation. The person's gone through 3 surgeries. We've been trying to get a safety transfer, but the agency that they've gone through, they've had 3 different caseworkers. So my person who goes there, she has to spend a whole days at a time just trying to go through the whole process. They've gone through the process, been several months, then they have to repeat it again and repeat it again because, you know, the place keeps on changing staff workers. The other situation was we finally did get the Boston Transportation Department to finally provide school transportation for the child to get to school, even though the child had witnessed the situation. There's been 3 surgeries. Clearly the mother was not capable of getting the child to school, but it took us several months to get the child into, to get school transportation. So there's some of these things that are so time intensive that there's got to be better ways on how this gets done. And if my staff person wasn't so persistent and we didn't allow her the flexibility, this stuff would have been lost among many other situations. So that's just one situation. The other situation is you're in Grove Hall. You know there's a lot of apartment buildings. I work with Soledad. We've been trying to deal with a number of issues. You know we have a lot of apartment buildings. We have a lot of children here. How many programs that are in school-based or city facilities are run in the evenings or on the weekends? There are none at this point. Thanks to Rufus, he talked about Project Right and Roxbury Wide doing the program. We do it Roxbury Wide for the last 10 years. I do rides from 11 to 1. When we have functioning vans, which is most of the time unless someone runs into one of our vans, I give rides probably to 18 to 24 children, teenagers, from 11 to 1 a.m. So that's why you don't see me on Saturdays, because I'm tired after doing all those rides. So we've been doing that for the last 10 years. But when you look at, we have a Grove Hall Community Center that's now doing senior-based programming. We're the ones doing, out of our funding that we're having a hard time running, we're doing programming at the Grove Hall Community Center at the Burke, Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're doing it in the summer. We're trying to figure out how we're going to do it again. We're the ones doing it, but it's not coming out of the city. The Little Ferdy Pilot Middle School, that is a great program, a facility, and we were trying to do some stuff in the gym, but it's all booked up. A lot of times, a lot of these places get booked up by AAU programs, but it's not based towards neighborhood-based programs. We would be doing more basketball league programs, more flag football, more other types of stuff, but we have a hard time trying to get into some of these facilities, and we need some help, and we need some, sometimes we do get cooperation and so forth, but sometimes we get into a lot of red tape, so that's where we need some help in terms of dealing with stuff. And the trauma stuff is real. It's getting much younger. We need to be more creative. We don't clearly have enough resources to do the follow-through, but I don't want to keep on. There's a number of important points that were raised. I do support them, and I'm looking forward to our continuing work with everybody around the table. We have some issues that we want to work with you on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And thank you to everyone who came out tonight. And I heard your concern specifically about the community going first. We've done that with some other hearings. I know with one of the body camera hearings, we started with the community panel. And so obviously we need to do that better next time. It's sometimes tough when we're navigating city employees and their schedules. But I want to thank everyone for coming out. I want to thank Councilor Jackson for his leadership on this. I want to thank the ABCD for allowing us to go over. Do you want to say a word or two before you wrap up?
Thank you so much, and I absolutely agree that the community should always go first. And I think that we need to put that as a policy in the Boston City Council to ensure that the community's voice is always heard on the record. I want to thank everyone who came out tonight. I want to thank the Boston Police Department and also in particular the members who are still here. These are critical issues. And as noted, and I want to thank Carlos for noting, we approve a budget, ladies and gentlemen. That's one of the most important things that we do in the city of Boston is a $3 billion budget, and it's our job as city councilors to go through that, and we'll get it tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. It's our job to go through that with a fine-tooth comb. If there are things that are in that budget that aren't working for our community, that need to be changed, and money that is being spent year over year that does not have outcomes, it is on us. And by the way, one of the only tools that we have is to vote down the budget. I've done that 2 out of the last 3 years. It is absolutely critical that you hold all of us accountable to ensure that there is service delivery in neighborhoods and communities that are dealing with this too much. And I want to thank Soledad for saying something that just really illuminated something that was on my mind. The data and all that stuff doesn't matter if there's 6 shootings on your block. It doesn't matter if on Sunday night, it's about to go hang out with a friend, and the call that I got is that there's a 5 or 6-year-old that got shot. None of that stuff matters. And sadly, also, it doesn't matter when a family feels like they're not being supported by their government and that they're put on trial in the court of public opinion for being a victim in their neighborhood and community. That's unacceptable. We have to do better. We must do better. And thank you so much for coming out. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'll add thank you to all the panelists, all those who participated in the forum. Thank you to the Boston City Council Central staff for sticking around. This is a recording. This is a live broadcast. This doesn't happen by accident. There are people who are hardworking city employees who do this. So thank you again to Central staff. Thank you to the residents. And thank you to our respective team members as well for the work they did and helping us put the panels together and doing outreach. Thank you. Have a wonderful night.